Chapter 2433. Fearful Silence. The huge battlefield fell into a deathly silence. The various sects' genius disciples on the battlefield instinctively stopped dead in their tracks, with all their eyes fixed on the head that flew out with astonishment. They were stunned exactly because all of them knew full well who the owner of that head belonged. The fight had been going on with many sacrificed, and it made no difference if another person died. However, it was still shocking that Pang Tao, who ranked 6th among the 12 minor kings, was dead. Dead! Pang Tao is dead! How is this possible? Everyone was in disbelief. The scene sent everyone into a state of stupor. Countless sets of eyes turned towards the young man who walked towards Pang Tao's body. The young man who held a sword in one hand was only exuding the divine powers of a peak chaotic realm. Nevertheless, everyone witnessed that Pang Tao was beheaded by this man in peak chaotic realm. Jian Wushuang soon arrived next to Pang Tao's headless body. He swept his eyes over the body and noticed a token which was held tightly in his palm. That token was Pang Tao's safety token. A moment ago, Pang Tao sensed danger while exchanging blows with Jian Wushuang. He reacted by taking out his safety token and was about to crush it. Unfortunately, his actions were too slow. He was just a small step away from saving himself by crushing the safety token in his hand. However, he died under Jian Wushuang's sword. He did not even have the chance to crush his life-saving safety token before dying. Even having a safety token can't save his life. Jian Wushuang smirked and took away Pang Tao's safety token and interspatial ring. He then waved his hand, and Pang Tao's body fell downward. The people around had yet to recover from their daze, especially Zhuo Bing and Zhong Yi, who was even more shocked than ever. The disciples of the Great Compassion sect were the ones who reacted first. Jian Wushuang, you killed senior brother Pang Tao. Just wait. We from the Great Compassion sect will never let you go. A first-class divine demon from Great Compassion sect shrieked. Jian Wushuang raised his brows and gave the first-class divine demon a side-eye and scoffed. Life and death are normal in battles for opportunities. Are you suggesting that only the Great Compassion sect is allowed to wantonly kill someone from other sects, but disciples from other sects aren't allowed to retaliate? If you are so free to be up there talking nonsense, you might as well avenge Pang Tao now. Of course, it depends if you can do so. The first-class divine demon was stunned by Jian Wushuang's rebuttal and was at a loss for words. He indeed had no guts to fight against Jian Wushuang. He was not alone. The genius disciples from various sects around him were terrified of Jian Wushuang. It was no joke since even Pang Tao died in Jian Wushuang's hands. Pang Tao was killed almost instantly without a chance to crush his safety token and escape. What kind of power was that? Noticing the people's expressions around him, Jian Wushuang faintly smiled and went over to Zhuo Bing. Big sister, you haven't given away the position token, right? No, I haven't, replied Zhuo Bing. That's good. It's yours since you got it. It'll kill whoever that dares to snatch it. Jian Wushuang was obviously saying that to the genius disciples around him. Those genius disciples were greedy for the position token in Zhuo Bing's hand. After hearing Jian Wushuang's warning, all of them were hesitating if it was worth snatching. They were fearful of Jian Wushuang. Why is Jian Wushuang so strong? I heard that he was able to duel second-class divine demons at the early stages of the chaotic realm. Now that he has reached peak chaotic realm, he's definitely stronger than before. How come he is so strong? Even Pang Tao was killed with a single wave of his sword with no chance to crush his safety token. How terrifying is that? I also think that Pang Tao's combat powers are a bit too much for a peak chaotic realm to handle. Maybe Jian Wushuang was just lucky? Could it be that Pang Tao was careless? Yes, it's possible. Those genius disciples were whispering. Jian Wushuang's beheading of Pang Tao shook the world. The sword movement was so fast that only a handful of people could see it. It was inevitable that many thought it was by mere luck that he killed Pang Tao. Motivated by the opportunities that came along with a position token, none of those disciples wanted to give it up so easily. After a round of discussion, many people looked at Jian Wushuang with their cold and menacing eyes. They had to attempt. A dark light beam appeared behind Jian Wushuang without warning. The dark light beam did not only strangely appear out of nowhere, but was also extremely fast with overwhelming power. That sneak attack was made by a reputable first-class divine demon. He was overjoyed seeing that the dark light beam reached less than 10 meters behind Jian Wushuang. It's done. That first-class divine demon let out a low laugh as the dark light beam penetrated Jian Wushuang's figure. However, there were no traces of blood after it went through the figure, and in the next moment, Jian Wushuang's figure slowly dissipated. No good. The first-class divine demon's expression, who did that sneak attack on Jian Wushuang, turned ugly. He immediately took out his safety token and got ready to crush it. Whiz! A purple light flashed and disappeared quickly. No one knew when it appeared or where it came from. Immediately after the purple light disappeared, another head flew out. That first-class divine demon was also too late in crushing his safety token. Such a case was normal, as having the safety token would only allow one to have a life-saving chance in the tomb, but it did not guarantee that one would not die. In the end, a few moments were needed to take out a safety token and crushed it. Oftentimes, crisis suddenly came so fast that one could not react in time and crush their safety token before being killed. In such cases, the safety token was left unused. On the other hand, Jian Wushuang's sword was fast approaching. The first-class divine demon that followed Pang Tao was also killed by Jian Wushuang, and both did not crush their safety token in time. A first-class divine demon was killed again with just a single movement of his sword. It dampened the spirit of those genius disciples around to snatch the position token. All of them appeared to be frightened by Jian Wushuang. If they thought Jian Wushuang was just lucky when he previously killed Pang Tao, everyone could now realize that it was not a mere coincidence with another first-class divine demon killed. Jian Wushuang had horrifying powers. Chapter 2434. 3 tokens. Too powerful. He is too powerful. Even a first-class divine demon was instantly killed. Wouldn't I be seeking death if I go up now? Many genius disciples around were afraid. They were afraid of Jian Wushuang's power. If one had such strong powers, no one would dare to challenge him, even if he had treasures that many wanted. Jian Wushuang was just that kind of a person. No one dared to snatch the position token in Zhuo Bing's hands with Jian Wushuang by her side. Of course, they were willing to give that up to a certain extent because it was only the first position token. There were a total of 6 position tokens, and the genius disciples around would have opportunities to compete for the other 5 tokens. There was no need to challenge that terrifying Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang noticed how the attitude of those people around him have changed. He knew that he had shown them enough to make them fearful of him and was pleased. "Big sister, let's go," said Jian Wushuang. The surrounding crowd immediately gave way to Jian Wushuang and the others. "Little brother," Zhuo Bing stared at Jian Wushuang incredulously. She even wondered if Jian Wushuang, who was standing in front of her, was really her little brother. She was worried sick when she knew that Pang Tao had targeted Jian Wushuang before, but who knew that Jian Wushuang was not bothered at all? Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong had weird expressions on their faces. Jian Wushuang smiled helplessly. "Everyone, I know you have a lot of questions, but we have to get out of here first. Yes, yes. Shuo Bing and the others agreed. Jian Wushuang and his group made their way out using the path that was opened up for them. However, someone was not going to let them leave so easily in that hidden independent space. I'm surprised by this young man. That Pang Tao guy who was killed by him had the power of peak divine demon, but had no chance to crush the token in his hand. Ha ha. It seems that was not enough to put pressure on Jian Wushuang. In that case, the Crimson Stone Saint smiled in a weird demeanor, and 2 white tokens appeared in his hand. Those 2 white tokens were instantly tossed out. Jian Wushuang, Shuo Bing, and the others were about to leave the crowd, as those genius disciples around had suppressed the greed in them. No one was going to do anything to stop them. At this moment, bang, bang, the ground underneath Jian Wushuang's feet suddenly cracked open, and 2 bright white lights shot up. The 2 white lights appeared right next to Jian Wushuang, one on each side. Jian Wushuang frowned and subconsciously waved his hand, catching both white tokens. The sudden change of events caught Jian Wushuang by surprise. Shuo Bing, the others next to him, and those genius disciples from various sects around were all stunned. The first token position, which appeared before that everyone was fighting for, had ended up in the hands of Shuo Bing. No one dared to fight for that token because of Jian Wushuang. Suddenly, 2 more position tokens appeared at the same time, and both fell directly into Jian Wushuang's hands. The 2 tokens plus the one with Shuo Bing added up to a total of 3 tokens altogether. Jian Wushuang had 3 tokens. Those genius disciples from various sects were consumed by jealousy. Jian Wushuang looked at the 2 position tokens in his hand and frowned. The position tokens were supposed to appear in every corner of the inner area, but now 3 of them appeared at the same time in the area where I'm located. It might be a coincidence for the first one, but these two were sent directly to me. How could it be a coincidence? It looks like I was intentionally put in this situation. Jian Wushuang seemed to have figured it out. His gaze became gloomy all of a sudden. He knew that all of this was deliberately plotted by someone, and there could only be one person who could control when and where these tokens appear in the tomb. Crimson Stone Saint. That old guy, is he targeting me? Jian Wushuang murmured. Those people around who had given way for Jian Wushuang and his group to leave had once again encircled them. There were hundreds of genius disciples from various sects, and all of them with their fiery eyes were staring at the 2 position tokens in Jian Wushuang's hands. One of the first-class divine demons said, "Jian Wushuang, you are indeed strong. We will let go of that position token with the Ice Queen, but I hope you would hand over those 2 position tokens to us." The first-class divine demon was quite polite, or perhaps he was just cautious and did not take immediate action to snatch it. He hoped that Jian Wushuang would take the initiative to hand the tokens over. Yes, the first position token is fine, but these 2 must be given away. There are only 6 position tokens. You already have 1. You can't be too greedy. Jian Wushuang, give it away. There were a few first-class divine demons around who acted as representatives, and all of them tried to coerce Jian Wushuang into giving up his tokens. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold. He knew that these genius disciples were horrified by his powers, hence they were willing to give up on a single token. However, to allow Jian Wushuang 3 position tokens which accounted for half of the 6 available seats, they were not going to let that happen. Little brother, Shuo Bing, and the others also looked at Jian Wushuang. They were calm. Although Jian Wushuang had attained 2 more position tokens, it was not something good. Jian Wushuang glanced at Shuo Bing, but he was actually deep in his thoughts. Big Sister is very keen at getting a seat to be enlightened by Feng Tian Scroll, so the first position token must be hers. I also need a position token for myself. As for Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong, Though they had not expressed their intentions, they are also extremely eager for those position tokens. Now that I have 3 tokens, the last token should be assigned to one of them, which currently is just. After pondering for a moment, Jian Wushuang had made up his mind. He needed all 3 tokens. How could he give them up? "Big sister, give me your token," said Jian Wushuang. Zhuo Bing did not hesitate and immediately took out her token. Jian Wushuang took it and said, "All of you get out of the battlefield." "Get out from the battlefield?" Zhuo Bing's expression changed. Chapter 2435. Besieged little brother, are you thinking of? Zhuo Bing frowned and looked at Jian Wushuang. She had figured out what Jian Wushuang was about to do. "Just leave it to me, and don't worry. I know what I am doing." Jian Wushuang gave her a reassuring smile. Zhuo Bing contemplated and sighed. "Okay, but you must be careful. If it doesn't work, hand over 1 or 2 of those tokens." "I know. I have Pang Tao's safety token now. If there's danger, it'll just crush the safety token and leave," said Jian Wushuang. Zhuo Bing finally gave in. "Well, go now." Zhuo Bing signaled the rest and walked towards the battlefield's edge with Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong. "Let them go." The crowd around immediately gave way. Those genius disciples were after the position tokens and saw Zhuo Bing giving hers to Jian Wushuang. They have decided to only deal with Jian Wushuang, since all the 3 position tokens were with him. Hence they could not wait for Zhuo Bing and the others to leave. After Zhuo Bing and the rest walked out of the crowd, they stood at the battlefield's edge and watched instead of leaving the area. "Junior sister, are we really just watching from here?" Ling Dan sought confirmation from Zhuo Bing. "We can only place our trust in little brother. Besides, you've seen his strength and power. We may not be able to help much," said Zhuo Bing. "Miss Zhuo Bing is right. Junior brother Wushuang has been hiding his true potential from the beginning. No one knows how strong he is exactly. Judging from his confident look, the many genius disciples might not be able to harm him at all. We just have to look from afar for now. Besides, junior brother Wushuang has Pang Tao's safety token. He can just crush it if he senses danger," added Zhong. Zhuo Bing and the others had left the battlefield, while Jian Wushuang remained encircled by those genius disciples from various sections. The 3 position tokens are in Jian Wushuang's hands. Those genius disciples present were greedily eyeing the 3 tokens. Jian Wushuang flipped his hands, and the 3 position tokens went into his interspatial ring. That provoked those genius disciples around with their expressions turning ugly. "Jian Wushuang, we respect your ability and have agreed not to snatch the first token from you and your group. Don't push our limits." "Yes, although you are capable, push past our limits, and we'll go after you. When that happens, it will be your dead end." "Jian Wushuang, I advise you not to be so full of yourself." A few first-class divine demons started yelling. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly as he swept his gaze around. "The 3 position tokens are indeed in my hands, but I can't hand over the tokens for nothing. If you really want them, come and grab it from me." "So bold. Since you are so stubborn, you can't blame us. Let's kill him together. Kill him, and all the 3 tokens will be up for grabs." Attack! About hundreds of genius disciples from various sects charged at the same time. Among them, there were nearly 10 first-class divine demons. They believed with their combined attacks, a true peak divine demons, even a top-tier one would not be spared. "Let's do it!" Zhuo Bing and the others were solemnly watching from outside the battlefield with some worries in their hearts. Boom, 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 boom. Suddenly, an overwhelming attack came down on Jian Wushuang. The attacks came from all directions, and there were so many of them that Jian Wushuang could not avoid it all. Nonetheless, Jian Wushuang did not intend to avoid them at all. With the strength of his right arm, his blood mountain sword hummed softly, and a majestic sword essence manifested itself. With him achieving the complete sword principle realm, Jian Wushuang's sword essence was more powerful than before. The sword essence greatly influenced his surroundings. Jian Wushuang himself seemed to have evolved into a black hole that was able to consume everything. In the middle of the black hole, a bunch of sword lights came forth. The sword lights were ferociously firing out like a rain of swords. Those atrocious attacks that were aimed at Jian Wushuang were instantly drowned by the rain of swords. The attacks were soon sent scattering in all directions. That was Xianluo Sword's principle. The qi coalesce. Did he just parry off all our attacks with a sword principle? His swordsmanship is powerful. Be careful, don't let him escape. The many genius disciples around began to locate where Jian Wushuang was, albeit just recovering from the shock. After the sword rain dissipated, Jian Wushuang's figure magically moved. Wow! Jian Wushuang's figure appeared in a void. Nearly 20 genius disciples in the void's vicinity immediately reacted. Rumble, a series of attacks were fired. Nonetheless, Jian Wushuang did use any sword principle to resist these attacks. He submitted himself to the assaults instead. The attacks shuttled past his body without touching any substance. That was obviously not Jian Wushuang's body. He's there. No, he's there. There is also one here. A series of exclamations sounded, and the many geniuses who besieged Jian Wushuang discovered that 5 Jian Wushuangs appeared on the battlefield at the same time. Adding in the one that they had just launched an attack on, there should be a total of 6 images. Those 6 Jian Wushuangs were exactly the same in appearance and demeanor. They could not tell which one was real. These are space-time shadows. Only those who had learned and apprehended space-time law could do this. Goodness, and he can create 6 space-time shadows at the same time. He must have a great understanding of space-time law. Perhaps he's very close to the first stage space-time apparition. Space-time apparitions can only trick the naked eyes, but not one's soul. With soul power 1, you can discern which of these 6 are merely shadows. Those genius disciples released their soul powers in the direction of Jian Wushuang. However, what their souls found, all 6 are shadows. How could that be? There, his real body is there. An exclamation sound came abruptly, and everyone looked around only to find that on a hill at the edge of the battlefield, a young man holding a sword was watching them with interest. That person was Jian Wushuang. While they were busy identifying which of these 6 shadows was Jian Wushuang, he had already broken free from their siege and went to the battlefield's edge. Chapter 2436. You've pissed me off too fast. Junior brother Wushuang's apprehension of space-time law has probably already been infinitely close to the first stage. None of these genius disciples could keep up with him. Zhong Yi and the others were shocked. They were worried that Jian Wushuang would not be able to face so many genius disciples single-handedly, but Jian Wushuang's speed had thrown them off by surprise. With such terrifying speeds and such high-level apprehension of the space-time law, no wonder Jian Wushuang was not afraid of these disciples' siege. Keep on attacking. Kill him. Although the 100 genius disciples saw Jian Wushuang's terrifying speed, they were not about to give up. Their attacks came firing like swarms of bees. Previously, Jian Wushuang could easily cope with their siege. It was an extravagant hope for those people to attack him when he had already broken through their siege. Not giving up yet. All right, I'll play along. Jian Wushuang smirked. His figure evolved once again. Whiff, 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 whiff. 6 space-time shadows appeared at the same time, and their speeds were fast. Where is he? Find him quick. The genius disciples roared and relied on their soul powers to again locate Jian Wushuang's real body. At the same time, Jian Wushuang's body appeared in another void some distance away from them. He was already halfway sitting down in that void with his brows jumping, like he was having fun. Damn, he's too fast. We can't keep up with him. No, I can't catch up to him at all. He's just playing with us. What do we do now? Those genius disciples finally understood what was going on. Among them was a first-class divine demon from one of the big sections. He was a strong man with a solid back and tapered waistline. That man was holding a giant axe while keeping an eye on Jian Wushuang with raging anger. Despite his anger, that man kept his sense. He's too fast. We can't do anything to him at all. We can only kill him if he fights us head-on instead of avoiding us. The strong man snorted. He turned his gaze slowly towards Zhuobing and the others who were not far away. The Ice Queen is his eldest sister. If we can capture her, we can force Jian Wushuang to face us. The strong man wore a cold and hard expression and had secretly made a decision in his heart. Everyone, let's capture the Ice Queen first. As long as the Ice Queen is in our hands, we don't have to worry about Jian Wushuang not handing over the position tokens. The strong man yelled as he dashed towards the direction of Zhuobing, and the rest, the many genius disciples around, were startled when they heard the strong man bellowed, and all of them immediately reacted thereafter. Yes, the Ice Queen is close with this brat. As long as we capture her, we can do as we wish. Ha! We can't do anything to Jian Wushuang, but we can target the Ice Queen. Hurry up! Don't let the Ice Queen escape. Around 100 genius disciples turned around and zoomed towards Zhuobing's direction. They knew they were unable to harm Jian Wushuang, who had a terrifying speed, but the Ice Queen was not as fast. Damn it! Zhuobing, Lingdan, and the rest saw what was coming as their facial expressions drastically changed. Shameless! Zhuobing cursed. Junior sister, run quickly! Lingdan repeatedly cried. Zhuobing turned around and left without hesitation. She did not want to fall into the hands of those mad genius disciples to be used as a bargaining chip against Jian Wushuang. However, while Zhuobing turned and fled, Jian Wushuang, who had been sitting in the void, took everything in with his cold gaze. His body instantly came sweeping down. In just a split second, he passed those genius disciples and first appeared behind Zhuobing. He stood protectively over Zhuobing. Jian Wushuang, so you have finally decided to fight? The strong man laughed out loud. They intended for Jian Wushuang to fight them head-on instead of avoiding them with his shadows so that they could kill Jian Wushuang together. They had achieved their goal. Little brother. Zhuobing's expression sank. She had never expected herself to become Jian Wushuang's burden. If she had known any better, she would have listened to Jian Wushuang and went off as far as she could, away from the battlefield. Jian Wushuang had to fight head-on with those genius disciples because of their siblings' relationship. Just when those genius disciples were delighted by Jian Wushuang's will to fight, Jian Wushuang raised his eyes and locked them on those disciples with a horrifying flash. Congratulations to guys, because you have pissed me off. Jian Wushuang's cold voice echoed throughout the area. One, his face resembled Shura, one as he was ready to kill. He had not intended for a massacre. After all, there were 100 genius disciples from various sects in the Wuxia wilderness in front of him. Most of these sects were not powerful, but there were several big sections. If he had killed any of them, it could have resulted in him declaring war on those sections. Although they were all fighting for the position tokens, being subject to the fate of life and death, they tried not to make any unnecessary moves. Therefore, if it was not necessary, Jian Wushuang would not want to kill. When he faced the siege of 100 genius disciples, he had only relied on his speed to break through the circle and simply played a trick on them. He was hoping that they would just admit defeat and give up on fighting. Jian Wushuang thought that he was being kind and merciful. Who would have thought that those disciples took his kindness for granted and went directly for Zhuobing to threaten him? Zhuobing was his big sister. Although they had only met for the first time in Saint's tomb, Zhuobing took care of him and even tried to stand up for him. She offered him her own safety token, which moved Jian Wushuang very much. That was the true affection of a family member. Jian Wushuang would not tolerate those unscrupulous genius disciples who wanted to harm his family members. That was the last straw. It had angered Jian Wushuang and awakened his desire to kill. It was ridiculous that those genius disciples were blinded by their desire for the position token, that they could not feel Jian Wushuang's wrath. They would not be bothered even if they felt it. "Let's fire together," the strong man shouted, and once again the 100 genius disciples attacked. Chapter 24:37. Massacre. There were 100 genius disciples, and among them were 10 first-class divine demons. With such a huge lineup, even a peak divine demons would admit defeat and flee. Due to that, those genius disciples were extremely confident in facing Jian Wushuang. So what if you're powerful? I don't believe alone you can face off 100 of us. The strong man had a wide grin. Jian Wushuang, who was standing in the void in front of him, transformed into several shadows. The strong man curled his lips. "Do you still want to run away from the fight? I'll hunt down the Ice Queen if you run away." As soon as that strong man finished his sentence, Jian Wushuang's figure appeared in the crowd without a warning. The void filled with a sense of bone-chilling atmosphere that they even spotted snow falling. At the same time as the falling snow, a dreamy sword light lit up. The sword light completely integrated with the void's snowflakes. The first style of purple blood sword skill, falling snow. A sword light swept across, and 13 heads instantly flew out at the same time. All 13 heads still had that crazed, ferocious look when they were being decapitated from their necks. What? The people around him were shocked. There was no way that 13 heads could be thrown out at the same time. Such a scene was rare. The sword light fell along with falling snowflakes, and Jian Wushuang's figure disappeared once again. When he appeared again, Jian Wushuang was still in the crowd, and in front of him stood more than a dozen genius disciples, including a first-class divine demon. Jian Wushuang wielded his sword. It was just a simple front stab across with his sword, and there was an instant rumbling. The void was filled with blood, and the whole world seemed to have completely plunged into a sure-ass hell with blood everywhere. Jian Wushuang, the sword in his hand, and even the sword technique that he used were completely turned into blood. That was the fourth style of purple blood sword technique, Blood Demon. The first-class divine demon was the first to react to Jian Wushuang's sword. "Hurry up, let's act together and block his sword." The first-class divine demon was terrified. If he was alone, he would not have dared to parry off Jian Wushuang's sword, but it was different when there were more than a dozen of them together. Hearing his shouts, more than a dozen genius disciples around immediately took action. A series of brutal attacks superimposed on top of each other and bombarded Jian Wushuang's bloody sword. Boom! There was a loud noise when the two forces of attacks collided. The area was completely reduced to a sea of blood. In the center of the blood sea, a defense formed by more than a dozen genius disciples collapsed. The blood-red sword light crushed everything and penetrated into the group. Numerous smaller blood-colored sword lights came out from the larger sword light and formed a huge blood-colored sword net. The net had more than a dozen genius disciples within it. Damn it! The expressions of those genius disciples drastically changed. Swoosh! The sound of those small sword lights entering their body came repeatedly, and more than a dozen genius disciples, except for the first-class divine demon who crushed the safety token and escaped at the nick of time, had their divine bodies cut into several pieces, or even dozens of pieces by the sword net. Blood and flesh scattered everywhere. Those genius disciples were ruthlessly killed in a blink of an eye. Whoosh! Jian Wushuang's figure disappeared again. When he appeared again, he was in front of the strong man who shouted fiercely before. There was another first-class divine demon who stood beside that strong man. For Jian Wushuang, there was no difference between first-class divine demons and second-class divine demons. Jian Wushuang drew out his sword. In that second when his sword was swung across, ripples appeared in the void. Time seemed to be completely frozen. That was Jian Wushuang's self-invented space-time sword technique. The first style, cutting snow. That strong man had a feeling like never before. He knew that death was near. His eyes were filled with terror, and without any hesitation, he grabbed his safety token. Just when he was about to crush his safety token, boom! A huge blow of soul power penetrated into his consciousness and bombarded his soul. It was a soul attack secret technique. 3 golden divine light. Jian Wushuang's soul attack skill was not strong. After all, he had yet to recover his power to the level of a divine demon realm. His soul attack skill was just detrimental to ordinary second-class or third-class divine demons. Luckily, although that strong man was a first-class divine demon, his soul power was not strong and probably only at the level of a second-class divine demon. In addition, he was defenseless as he was not prepared for an attack on his soul. That made him miss the opportunity to crush his safety token. Swoosh! The blurry sword light swept across and cut that strong man's head off. Before breathing his last, the strong man was in a state of stupor. He's not only skillful with a sword, but also good at launching soul attacks. The strong man died. The first-class divine demon, who was beside him, saw that the situation was no good. Hence he crushed his safety token and fled. Jian Wushuang took away the strong man's interspatial ring before his body disappeared again. Whoosh! 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 Jian Wushuang's figure repeatedly disappeared and reappeared among the crowd. He was too fast, making it almost impossible for those genius disciples to catch hold of him. Every time he appeared, he was accompanied by a terrifying sword light. The sword light was invincible. No one could resist it, regardless of first-class or second-class divine demons. Those who had a safety token instantly crushed it to save their own lives. Those without one would be dead in no time. Whoosh! 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 His repeated appearances sent heads flying. Those headless bodies fell down like raindrops. In an instant, Jian Wushuang had disappeared and appeared about 7 times, back and forth, which was enough to scare the remaining genius disciples witless. Run! Run now! The genius disciples who were still alive screamed and frantically fled into the surrounding void at top speeds. Everyone was running for their lives. They did not stop until they were in the void, which was further away from the battlefield. After that, with horrified eyes, they turned and looked towards the battlefield ahead. Chapter 2438. Big trouble. The battlefield looked like an inferno itself. Blood covered the grounds, reflecting its crimson colors to the sky. Headless bodies were scattered everywhere, and they were already considered pleasant-looking. There were many other corpses that were slashed open by the sword with its blood and flesh splattered across. One could not even put their body parts back together. The thick stench of blood filled the air, making it nauseating. Among those who were lucky enough to have survived, there were many genius disciples who had seen a lot in their lives, but they still could not help but felt shaken by such sight. In the center of the battlefield, Jian Wushuang was floating at a low altitude with his blood mountain sword's tip pointing towards the ground as blood glided and dripped down his sword. At that moment, he was like the god of death's statue. In such a short time, his figure had only disappeared and reappeared 7 times. However, he had killed at least 70 or 80 genius disciples during his 7 reappearances. Bear in mind that the total number of genius disciples was only up to 100 people. In that brief moment, he had already slaughtered more than half of them. Only 30 to 40 lucky geniuses escaped. He's the devil himself. Someone shouted in horror. The word devil also appeared in everyone's minds. Some people were horrified, some were stunned, and some were almost mortally devastated. Junior brother, senior sister. Screams of anguish turned up one by one, and the entire battlefield was filled with incomparable sadness. Jian Wushuang, you dare kill our disciples from Snow Sun Sect? Just you wait. We from the Snow Sun Sect will never let you get away with this. A second-class divine demon disciple from Snow Sun Sect pointed his finger at Jian Wushuang, screaming in extreme devastation with his slightly trembling voice. It was understandable why he felt that way. The Snow Sun Sect was a big sect after all, and had 8 disciples who entered Saint's tomb. Among them were 2 first-class divine demons. However, in that short massacre carried out by Jian Wushuang, only 2 of them survived. That's right, we from Sky Shadow Sect will also avenge our dead disciples. Jian Wushuang, be prepared for your death. With such mindless killing of various sects' disciples, not even Narcissus Island could back you up. Growls were continuously heard. The geniuses that were lucky enough to survive stared deadly at Jian Wushuang. Due to their distance from Jian Wushuang, they were not afraid that he would come and slaughter them. Hence the fear in their hearts began to disperse to be replaced with surging hatred and grudge. Jian Wushuang raised his head slowly, looking at all those geniuses' facial expressions and hearing those words that they shouted at him. The corners of his mouth curved upwards and gave a smile of disdain. Jian Wushuang truly did not care. Geniuses, a bunch of amateurs like that could be regarded as geniuses? What a joke! Jian Wushuang retracted the Blood Mountain sword, not wasting another moment to glance at the so-called geniuses. He turned around and walked towards Zhou Bing and the rest. As for those disciples, although they were still yelling and shouting claiming that they wanted vengeance, none of them dared to take action or even took a step forward. The reason being they would probably die under Jian Wushuang's sword if they went up. Seeing that Jian Wushuang did not pay attention to them, their shouts got even more heated. It was certain that they had also reported those occurrences to their respective elders and experts. Little brother, junior brother Wushuang, Zhu Bing, Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, Su Tong, and all the disciples from Narcissus Island and Ancient Star Temple came before Jian Wushuang. The way they looked at him was filled with respect and even fear. The way Jian Wushuang was killing just a minute ago not only terrified those genius disciples who attacked him, but also made those from his side horrified. Even Zhu Bing, who was Jian Wushuang's own sister, had a slight fear in her eyes at that moment. She had only first met Jian Wushuang in Saint's tomb. After a few days of coming in contact with him, Jian Wushuang had left her an impression of being soft-spoken, sophisticated, easy to talk to, and a very calm temperament. Not only her, but all the disciples from Narcissus Island also felt that way. However, who would have thought that as soon as he started killing, he could be so terrifying? He was simply a devil, an ultimate god of death. Most importantly, he had his massive abilities to rely on. Little brother, are you all right? Zhu Bing asked carefully. I'm okay, just got into some small troubles. Jian Wushuang smiled towards those geniuses who tried to kill him. He was the ultimate god of death or devil, but towards Shuabing and those close to him, Jian Wushuang was still as soft-spoken, sophisticated, and modest. Little troubles. Shuabing and the rest smiled wryly. Zhong Yi exclaimed, "Junior brother Wushuang, the mess you've gotten into is not little. You've got yourself in big trouble. You killed 70 to 80 people in just an instant. These people are genius disciples from various sections I had counted. Among the ones you killed were disciples from close to 20 different sections. Although most of them are not from very powerful sects, there are still quite a few big sects among them. Most importantly, you had killed Pang Tao." Shuabing, Ling Dan, and Su Tong's faces turned gloomy. Yes, Pang Tao. That was crucial. Pang Tao was not only one of the 12 minor kings. Most importantly, he was also one of the most outstanding genius disciples from the Great Compassion sect. His teacher was the top elder from the Great Compassion sect, the #1 sword cultivator of Wuxia Wilderness, Fan Jianxian. Having a disciple like that died under Jian Wushuang's sword, how could the Great Compassion sect ignore it? How would that be possible? Although this is Saint's tomb, one should not have been blamed for killing another while competing for the position token where life and death were all up to fate. What you have done is really too big of a deal. Even we of Narcissus Island may not be able to endure pressures from so many sects, including the Great Compassion sect's fury, continued Zhong Yi. Besides, even if we were strong enough to bear it, the Great Compassion sect and other sects must feel dissatisfied in their minds. They'll do whatever they can to deal with you. If they're not able to deal with you in the open, they would use all kinds of underhanded tricks. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that I'm afraid your forthcoming days will not be pleasant, junior brother Wushuang. Senior brother Zhong Yi is right. Those sects all look holier than thou. They certainly would not let this go easily. Su Tong joined in as well. Perhaps, but I wouldn't be too worried. Let them come. It's useless to feel regretful now, since I've already done it. Jian Wushuang smiled with a relaxed look as usual. He never regretted killing. Besides, killing one or many were both acts of killing. The only difference for him was whether they deserved to be killed. In fact, he was trying to be merciful at that time, but those geniuses from various sects were seeking death. Jian Wushuang could only comply with their wishes. Chapter 2439. Fury Ling Dan looked at Jian Wushuang. Junior brother Wushuang, you don't seem to be worried at all. If I were you and got in such big trouble, I would have probably been scared to death and wouldn't dare to stay in Wuxia Wilderness, let alone Ancient Star Temple. Jian Wushuang gave out a big laugh. Ha ha. As a matter of fact, the situation isn't as bad as you think. After all, the people that I've killed were those drooling over the position token in my hand. They were killed because they tried to take it from me. In Saint's tomb, life and death in those battles for opportunities have always been up to fate. Those sects won't be able to point fingers. However, what senior brother Zhong Yi just said reminded me that it's easy to dodge an attack out in the open, but harder to prevent one in the dark. If those sects are looking for trouble with me, they'll just endure it. There's nothing to worry about. However, I'm more worried about them playing tricks, such as making a move on my parents just for revenge. Father, mother. Shuabing's face changed. Her father, Zhu Yunfeng, was only in half-step divine demon realm, and her mother Luo Xinqin only had a common chaotic realm cultivation level. If those sects intended to seek revenge and sent any of their divine demons, the Zhuo couple would not be able to withstand them. Little brother, what should we do? Shuabing looked over. Jian Wushuang squinted. Father and mother live in Anzhou Commandery. It would take time for even the nearest sect to do anything to them. In a minute, I'll request Elder Wujian to send people over to Anzhou Commandery to protect our parents. It would be best if they could relocate or simply be brought to Narcissus Island. That's right. They must be protected immediately. Shuabing kept nodding. Junior brother Wu Shuang, am now preparing to report what happened here to the second elder. Why not let me make the request for you? Said Zhong Yi. No need to be hasty. You don't need to report what happened to them, because they will soon come over to find us. Jian Wushuang smiled. Zhong Yi paused for a moment and immediately understood. At the same moment, in the wide glade outside of Saint's tomb, those leading elders from various sects of Wuxia wilderness had gathered there and were quietly waiting. In one of the corners, "Ha, Lingi, looks like your Narcissus Island has produced a freak." Truly, he could fight a second-class divine demon during early-stage chaotic realm, and now he had passed a trial bridges challenge in Saint's tomb, obtaining the relics of Purple Blood Saint. This kid, Jian Wushuang, has a bright future ahead of him. Wu Jian, I heard that you were the one who brought Jian Wushuang onto Narcissus Island. That kid was also invited to join the Great Compassion Sect at the same time, and Fan Jianxian from the Great Compassion Sect had even intended to take him as his personal disciple. You are truly something to be able to bring that kid under such conditions to Narcissus Island. Some elders from certain sects were surrounding the 3 Narcissus Island elders and casually chatting with a sense of flattery in their tones. When the word about Jian Wushuang's background started spreading in Saint's tomb, the elders from various sects naturally knew about it. Such an incredible demon had inevitably become the hottest topic among those elders. The elders from various sects felt envious, even jealous, toward Narcissus Island. They were jealous that Narcissus Island had such an unbelievable genius in sword principles. Given some time, this sword genius could probably jump up the ranks and hold a status among the gods. He could even progress towards becoming an undying saint after that. Such would obviously make those elders envious. The 2 elders from Narcissus Island and Elder Wujin were delighted from listening to those various sects experts giving flattering words. Elder Wujin wore an obvious pride on his face and even looked over at the 7th elder next to him. Previously, the 7th elder had a few conflicts with him, especially when he gave Jian Wushuang the elder token and recommended him to participate in Saint's tomb. The 7th elder made things extra difficult for him, as he did not look highly upon Jian Wushuang at all at that time. However, this 7th elder now kept quiet, stood in, and dare not look at Wu Jin at all. It was understandable, as the 7th elder himself felt really agonized as well. That kid, he's obviously an outer disciple. Who would have thought that he is such a big freak? Plus, he is a low-profile big freak who concealed his abilities and talents. Who would have known that with such terrifying talents, he was content to be only an outer disciple? If no one exposed his true background, I'm afraid all of the superiors on Narcissus Island would still be in the dark, except Wu Jian. The 7th elder secretly exclaimed. He acknowledged that he had been short-sighted over the issue of Jian Wushuang and was unable to recognize his talents. Hence, he had nothing to say when Wu Jin pridefully showed off at him. Nonetheless, he felt a sense of joy and excitement. At the end of the day, he was an elder from Narcissus Island and thus felt happy that they had such an amazing disciple. However, just when the 3 Narcissus Island elders were feeling joyful, rumbling, and horrifying energy suddenly exploded on the glade. As the energy blew up, it caught the attention of all the experts on the glade. Various pairs of eyes looked over at the direction of where the energy exploded, and that was where those experts from the Great Compassion Sect were. Swish, 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 swish. 5 figures had risen from the ground. Of those 5 people, 4 of them were elders from the Great Compassion Sect who led the disciples. The 5th person was widely regarded as the #1 genius of the Great Compassion Sect, as well as Wuxia Wilderness, the first-ranked 12 minor kings, Tu Qiancheng. At that moment, They looked extremely furious, with horrifying energy emitting from 5 of them. Lingi, your Narcissus Island disciple, has such audacity. That explosive shout came from a great compassion sect elder, whose cultivation level was at peak divine demon. Following that shout, the 5 experts directly appeared in front of the 3 elders from Narcissus Island. 5 bolts of peak divine demon energy had completely locked on them. That scene had made all the experts from various sects dumbfounded. What's the meaning of this? Why are the experts of the Great Compassion sect so angry at Narcissus Island? Maybe it is because those Narcissus Island disciples had some run-ins with those from the Great Compassion sect. However, it doesn't seem like those Narcissus Island disciples would have the galls to seek trouble with those from the Great Compassion sect. The experts were all puzzled. Not only them, but even the 2nd elder Lingi Wujian and the 7th elder from Narcissus Island were also completely stunned. My friends from the Great Compassion sect, what has caused such anger in you? Perhaps our disciples from Narcissus Island had offended you in Saint's tomb? Elder Lingi asked with a tone of modesty. You still didn't know why we're so furious? The experts from the Great Compassion sect had their faces flushed red, obviously trying hard to suppress their anger. Chapter 2440. Resolution. Gentlemen, we honestly don't know how we could have offended your sect. Could you please explain in detail? Elder Lingi said. One of the Great Compassion sect's old men, who were in purple robe, coldly said, Humph, your disciple from Narcissus Island killed our genius disciples in Saint's tomb. It would be another matter if it was only a regular genius disciple, but Pang Tao was the one who he killed. What? All of the experts from various sects were caught by surprise. Pang Tao. Even Elder Lingi was dumbfounded. Pang Tao was one of the 12 minor kings who enjoyed great fame among the younger generation in Wuxia Wilderness. Naturally, all the experts from different sects knew about him. Elder Lingi looked at the purple-robed old man. Mr. Hanyan, you've got to be joking. Everyone knows that Pang Tao is one of the 12 minor kings and was ranked 6th. His battle strength is definitely not below peak divine demon. Besides, such a genius disciple would definitely have a safety token with him. With his powerful ability and the safety token, who would be capable of killing him in Saint's tomb? The experts from other sects around them secretly nodded as well. It was indeed true that based on Pang Tao's abilities, even if he was besieged by many experts, he could always escape with his safety token the moment he realized he was in a life and death crisis. Killing him within Saint's tomb, unless Crimson Stone Saint did it himself, was almost an impossibility. I'm not in a mood to joke with you. Pang Tao is truly dead, and he was killed by Jian Wushuang, your genius disciple from Narcissus Island. Many people clearly saw that he killed Pang Tao with one sword stroke. Pang Tao didn't even get the chance to break his safety token. If you don't believe me, you could send a message out and ask the purple-robed old man. Han Yun said coldly, Jian Wushuang. Elder Lingi Wujian and the 7th elder looked at each other as their expressions changed. Just as they were about to send a message to inquire, Lingi, your disciple from Narcissus Island, has such a ruthless tactic. A furious shout broke out. Another few menacing bolts of expert energy dashed at the 3 Narcissus Island elders. And that was only the beginning. Narcissus Island. All right, Narcissus Island. We from Radiant Palace had a total of 8 disciples who went into Saint's tomb, and 6 of them died at Jian Wushuang's hands. Narcissus Island, we need a resolution. We from Crimson Heaven Sect also have 4 disciples that died at Jian Wushuang's account. We from Pinnacle Tower have also lost 3 disciples to Jian Wushuang. Those voices of fury continuously resonated one after another. One sect came after another. The stronger ones had extremely similar stature as Narcissus Island. The weaker ones also had a few peak divine demons in residence. At that rate, there were close to 20 sects that came directly at them. All of these experts were burning with rage while staring at the three of them. They have all just received news about the massacre carried out by Jian Wushuang, and had many disciples who died under his sword. Elder Lingyi, Elder Wujian, and the seventh elder were stunned beyond words looking at so many sects coming toward them together. All those various sects experts around them were wearing extremely strange expressions as well. Ha! Looks like we, the Great Compassion sect, are not the only ones who suffer a big loss to that Jian Wushuang. A great many other disciples have also died under his sword. Huh? Han Yun smiled coldly. His smile was as sharp as a blade's edge. Lingyi, all of us need an explanation from Narcissus Island, shouted Han Yu. Yes, there needs to be a resolution. Our disciples cannot die in vain. That Jian Wushuang is simply the devil. He killed so many genius disciples in one go without even blinking an eye. A person such as this cannot be kept alive in the world. Otherwise, he would bring major catastrophe to Wuxia Wilderness. The experts from multiple sects who came at them started voicing out. Elder Lingyi felt trapped. Although Narcissus Island was a big enough sect to be listed within the top 10 of Wuxia Wilderness, when faced with so many sects at once was not an easy task, especially the Great Compassion sect, under the continuous bombardment from those experts. Elder Lingyi took a deep breath and finally spoke. Everyone, could you please give me some time and let me inquire what just happened so that I could give everybody an answer? Sure, you go and ask them yourself. It would be best to ask in detail to see if we lied about Jian Wushuang starting a massacre in Saint's Tomb and killing so many disciples from various sects, said Han Yun. Elder Lingyi did not hesitate and immediately sent an inquiry message. Of course, the person she asked was Zhong Yi. Zhong Yi soon answered her and explained the entire matter in great detail. After a long moment, Elder Lingyi finally gave a long exhale. Second Elder, is it true what they have said? Jian Wushuang really killed Pang Tao and all these genius sect disciples? Elder Wujian and Seventh Elder both looked at Elder Lingyi. In their minds, they could not come to believe any of it. It was not that they did not believe Jian Wushuang had the guts to do such a thing. It was really because they did not believe he had such abilities. After all, Jian Wushuang was currently only in the chaotic realm. With a heavy expression and under the scrutiny of Elder Wujian and Seventh Elder, Elder Lingyi nodded. It's true. Both Elder Wujian and the Seventh Elder were dumbfounded. Lingyi, you can finally verify it, can't you? Han Yun once again looked over. Elder Lingyi raised her head to look directly at Han Yun and those experts from various sects who came at them before deepening her voice, and said, Everyone, I've clarified what has happened. Jian Wushuang did kill Pang Tao in Saint's Tomb, as well as many of your genius disciples. However, the issue began with them coveting those 3 position tokens that Jian Wushuang had obtained. They took action and besieged Jian Wushuang in order to get his tokens. Other than that, our disciple told me that Jian Wushuang did not intend to start a bloodbath. He was only planning to avoid fighting by relying on his own speed and finesse so that your disciples would retreat from the difficulty of targeting him. However, your disciples chose to attack his big sister in order to force Jian Wushuang to threaten him into battle and accept their challenges. It was only at that time when Jian Wushuang started killing. The fights for those positions in Saint's Tomb has always been extremely frenzied. Many genius disciples would lose their lives in every competition. Narcissus Island also suffered many huge losses over those position competitions in Saint's Tomb. It was a fair fight after all, and we left everything up to fate. Hence we had never blamed it on anyone, and neither had we ever thought of seeking revenge from the opposing sections. However, you can only blame their insufficient skills since your disciples were killed for snatching those position tokens from Jian Wushuang. How could you blame it on Narcissus Island? Now, as for demanding us to offer a resolution, that's even more laughable. We of Narcissus Island will not offer a resolution. Chapter 2441. The target of all, we from Narcissus Island will not offer a resolution. Elder Lingi said with absolute firmness, and she had enough reasons to do so. It was because Narcissus Island was on the side of reason that she could stand her ground. Lingi, what do you mean by that? Are our sect geniuses meant to just die in vain? Hanyan growled softly. It's a shame that your disciples died, but they're to be blamed for not being skillful enough. Narcissus Island can't take the blame. After all, they were the ones who took the initiative to snatch Jian Wushuang's position tokens. He couldn't just not defend himself and present his head to the others, could he? Elder Lingi said. Hearing her words, they could not argue even though those experts were angry. The fact that they were coveting for what another person had obtained and tried snatching it away, but only to get killed instead due to their own technical deficiencies. That was not something they could blame the other person for. You're right, Lingi. The competition for position tokens has always been something we leave up to fate. Our disciples died from their own undoing and could only blame themselves. If that's the case, since Jian Wushuang possesses 3 position tokens, that would mean it's equally feasible for our Great Compassion Sect disciples to kill him during the tokens snatching process, said Han Yun. Of course, it's a battle of opportunities, and there are bound to be occurrences of deaths, said Elder Lingi. Very well then, we're glad to have your word. Let's go. Han Yun waved his hand before those experts from the Great Compassion Sect turned around and left. As for the remaining other sect's experts, they could do nothing else but to follow suit after seeing that the Great Compassion Sect leaving despite still feeling dissatisfied. Elder Lingi, Elder Wujian, and 7th Elder gathered immediately upon the departure of those experts. 2nd Elder, it's apparent that Han Yun wants Jian Wushuang to die in Saint's tomb from his words. Why didn't you stop him? Elder Wujian frowned. Elder Ling's voice lowered. Stop him? How to stop him? Jian Wushuang had a run-in with so many sects at once and got into such a big trouble. It's fortunate that this happened over the fight for opportunities, and it wouldn't implicate Narcissus Island. However, if we still force our way through and defend him, how do you suppose we could negotiate with sects like the Great Compassion Sect? Are we to just watch the Great Compassion Sect destroy Jian Wushuang? Elder Wujian was not having it. It's something that can't be helped. He was the one who got himself into that mess, and will have to bear the consequences. We from Narcissus Island could help him within our means. As for whether he could overcome this ordeal, it really depends on himself, said Elder Lingi. Elder Wujian kept quiet upon hearing that. Indeed, that was too big of an issue, making it impossible for Narcissus Island to completely defend Jian Wushuang. Wujian, you have the best relationship with Jian Wushuang among us 3, and also the only person who has his message token. Go ahead and have a good talk with him. Tell him what just transpired here, just so that he has some prior preparation, said Elder Lingi. Elder Wujian nodded slightly and took out Jian Wushuang's message token. Jian Wushuang. Elder Wujian immediately sent him a message. Elder Wujian, I knew you would immediately look for me. Jian Wushuang replied very soon, with his absolutely calm tone. You've got into a big mess. Why are you not worried at all? Elder Wujian surprisingly said, Wasn't that about killing just 1 or 2 genius disciples? What's the big deal? Jian Wushuang smiled. What do you mean 1 or 2? You've killed a total of 70 to 80 geniuses from close to 20 sects. That aside, the most important part is that you even killed Pang Tao. He's from the Great Compassion sect and the personal disciple of Fan Jianxian, said Elder Wu Jian. Jian Wushuang remained smiling. What's done is done. It's useless to regret. Elder Wu Jian, perhaps the reason you sent me a message is that you've been pressured by those other sects and the Great Compassion sect. Am I right? Elder Wu Jian nodded. Yes, just a while ago, the Great Compassion sect and those others came up to us. Even though we had sent them off, Narcissus Island can't forcibly protect you. After this, the Great Compassion sect and their lot will find every means to make a move on you in Saint's Tomb and avenge their disciples, especially the Great Compassion sect. You have to know a total of 30 Great Compassion sect disciples have gone into Saint's Tomb. Among them are 9 first-class divine demon, which includes Long Zishan and Yuaoqing, who are both listed in the 12 minor kings. They will definitely join forces to avenge Pang Tao's death. Aside from that, I'm afraid every sect's disciples in Saint's Tomb has already caught wind of the 3 position tokens in your possession by now. Even if they have no enmity against you, they will still seek you out just to snatch those position tokens from you, which means that you have probably become everyone's target in Saint's Tomb. Everyone's target? Huh? Jian Wushuang reacted, but without any sense of surprise. Setting the sect's grudges aside, it was only natural that he would have become everyone's target for just having 3 position tokens in his hands. Jian Wushuang, you need to constantly be careful in Saint's Tomb from here on. We from Narcissus Island can't help you too much. You can only rely on yourself. If push comes to shove, just give up on those 3 position tokens. If the situation is worse than that, just use Pang Tao's safety token and protect yourself. Although that would mean missing your chance to access the most precious opportunity in Saint's Tomb, it's always better than throwing your life away, said Elder Wu Jian. Jian Wushuang nodded. Understood. Oh yes, there's something I would like to ask Elder Wu Jian for help. It's about my parents. You're right. The tactics that these sects used are sometimes not exactly honorable. If they couldn't get you out in the open, they might play dirty like making a move on your parents. Don't worry, I shall send people to relocate your parents just to ensure they're all right, said Elder Wu Jian. Well then, thank you for your efforts, Elder Wu Jian. Jian Wushuang was relieved. He was not worried about his own safety, but of his current lifetime's parents. As long as his parents were protected, he would feel more settled. Inside Saint's Tomb, all the disciples of Narcissus Island and Ancient Star Temple gathered around. How was it, little brother? Shuabing and the rest looked at him. They knew that Jian Wushuang was communicating with an elder from Narcissus Island. It's as I predicted. Those sects couldn't involve Narcissus Island on this issue, but they would do whatever it takes to seek me for revenge. In addition, news of me possessing 3 position tokens has gone out. For the remaining period, it'll become the target of all in Saint's Tomb. My every move will be a difficult one, said Jian Wushuang. Chapter 2442. Staying in inner area, target of all? What should we do? Shuabing panicked. Jian Wushuang smiled lightly. Well, it's actually not that big of a deal. My abilities are obvious, and also I have a safety token. How simple do they think killing me is? However, all of you would run into plenty of trouble because of me, so you'd better leave the inner area. Leave the inner area. Shuabing and the rest were all stunned. Jian Wushuang turned his wrist and took out 2 position tokens. How about this? Out of those 3 position tokens, I'll keep 1. Big sister will take 1. As for the last one, senior brother Ling Dan, senior brother Zhong Yi, and senior sister Su Tong can make the arrangements. Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong were slightly tempted. They were filled with an eagerness for the position token. However, they knew full well that those tokens were obtained by Jian Wushuang alone, and he had borne a huge risk for that. Junior sister Zhuo Bing already has one. I don't need it, said Ling Dan quickly and without any hesitation. Senior brother Zhong Yi, I've gotten quite a few benefits in Saint's Tomb this time around. I think you should take the position token, said Su Tong. Zhong Yi kept quiet for a while and nodded a little. I shall take it then. Thank you, junior brother Wushuang. Jian Wushuang mildly smiled. Temporarily leave the inner area with those tokens and hide out there for some time. You can return when the fighting and killings in the inner area are over, along with the Feng Tian scroll opening up. In Saint's Tomb, the outer area was much bigger than the inner area. If they left for the outer area, genius disciples from other sects would not be able to easily snatch their tokens. After all, it would be difficult to just locate their whereabouts. Every time Saint's Tomb opened, a lot of geniuses who obtained those tokens would have chosen to hide in the outer area. Little brother, if we're going to the outer area, how about you? Aren't you coming with us? Zhuo Bing frowned. Jian Wushuang shook his head. I can't go. Besides, it's useless to go. Those sex geniuses could still easily locate me. Why? Zhuo Bing and the rest could not understand. The outer area was a vast land. If Jian Wushuang hid there, would it not be impossible for those various sex genius disciples to find him? However, Jian Wushuang smiled and explained, Think about it. How did I manage to get all 3 position tokens at once? Jian Wushuang's words surprised them. It was only then that they remembered what they saw when Jian Wushuang obtained the 3 position tokens. The 3 tokens had appeared in the most strange and mysterious fashion. The inner area was so large, and the 6 tokens were supposed to appear one by one at different corners. However, 3 of those tokens appeared in the same area. The first token, at least, made sense as it was being pursued by everyone and fell into Zhuo Bing's hand in the end. However, the second and third tokens appeared simultaneously right next to Jian Wushuang, which was obvious that it was given directly to him. If they were supposed to randomly appear, that coincidence did not make sense. Junior brother Wushuang, do you mean he has something to do with it? Zhong Yi frowned hard. Although he did not mention that person's name, everyone knew he was referring to the owner of Saint's Tomb, Crimson Stone Saint. Although Crimson Stone Saint had long passed, his consciousness must have remained within the tomb in bits and pieces. Everything that happened in Saint's Tomb was all within his control. The strange appearance of the 3 position tokens could have only one explanation. Crimson Stone Saint did that on purpose. He deliberately gave Jian Wushuang all 3 position tokens and made him the target for all, causing everyone to try and take it from him. Why? Why did Crimson Stone Saint want to do so? Zhong Yi was puzzled. Who knows? Maybe he's only interested in me alone or wants something from me. Whichever is the case, that old fart has really locked his sights on me. Under such conditions, it doesn't matter where I go. As long as I'm still in Saint's Tomb, I wouldn't be able to escape his grasp. Those geniuses could also easily find me with his hints. If that's the case, I'd rather just stay in the inner area instead of looking for a hideout and allow whatever needs to happen unfold, said Jian Wushuang calmly. Forget it then, just be extra careful, said Zhuo Bing. What she could only do at the moment was to give a word or 2 of advice. Otherwise, there was nothing else she could have done to help. I will, all of you go ahead. Jian Wushuang waved his hand. Zhuo Bing and Zhong Yi quickly led the many disciples from Narcissus Island and Ancient Star Temple to leave for the outer area. Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold once they were gone. He looked around the void and coldly said, Hey, old fart, I don't really know what you're trying to do, but if you are trying to find out my abilities or my background using those sex geniuses, I'm afraid it's not that easy." Jian Wushuang's voice resonated outwards, but there was not a soul around. It did not seem like anyone heard his words either. However, Crimson Stone Saint could hear every word he said in the hidden, isolated space. "This kid's pretty smart. He knows my intention. He'll keep a close watch since that's the case." Crimson Stone Saint smiled as his consciousness was completely locked on to Jian Wushuang, watching his every move. In other parts of Saint's tomb's inner area, genius disciples from various sects were still waiting for the position token's appearance. While the frenzied fight for Jian Wushuang's 3 position tokens was occurring, only one other token appeared elsewhere and fell into the hand of Great Compassion Sect's Long Zishan after an intense battle. On an open field, 10 disciples from the Great Compassion Sect gathered. Their leader was the well-reputed Long Zishan. "Senior brother Zishan, you're still better than the rest. You get the token as soon as you take action. Moreover, the other sects immediately stop when you get it. They dare not continue fighting you." What's with the empty words? Senior brother Zishan is ranked 3 on the 12 minor kings. Unless they want to die, how will those sect's genius disciples have the guts to fight with him? A few Great Compassion Sect disciples were brown-nosing Long Zishan. Long Zishan slightly smiled over their praises and felt a little proud inside. What hilarity! Either his abilities as the 3-ranked 12 minor kings or his identity as a genius disciple from Great Compassion Sect would have allowed him to do as he wished in Saint's tomb, which disciples from regular sects dared to fight with him over the token. Right at that moment, the Great Compassion Sect's top genius, Tu Qiancheng, who was staying outside of Saint's tomb, sent him a direct message. Upon receiving the message, Long Zishan's smiling face immediately froze while still sitting on the ground. Chapter 2443, Highly Priced Bounty, Junior Brother Pang Tao died. Long Zishan was in disbelief. What? The Great Compassion Sect disciples around him were also dumbfounded. How's that possible? How could Senior Brother Pang Tao get killed in Saint's tomb? Senior Brother Pang Tao had a safety token, who was so skillful that Senior Brother Pang Tao couldn't even take out his safety token. Shouts rose one by one. The Great Compassion Sect disciples were overwhelmed by surprise and even more fury. "It's him, Jian Wushuang?" Long Zishan squinted. The image of a weak-looking young man with only a chaotic realm cultivation level had appeared in his mind. Naturally, Long Zishan did not pay much attention to Jian Wushuang, and Pang Tao unexpectedly died in his hands. "I'm to be blamed. I shouldn't have let Junior Brother Pang Tao go to that area." Long Zishan's face wore a sense of regret and stood up the next moment. "Elder Hanyan has an order. He wants us to do everything we can to kill Jian Wushuang and avenging Junior Brother Pang Tao. Let's go. Let's first regroup with Junior Sister Ouching before looking for Jian Wushuang." Long Zishan and the rest of the Great Compassion Sect disciples immediately moved out. Meanwhile, countless different sects' genius disciples in Saint's tomb received the news. Good God! 100 geniuses besieging Jian Wushuang alone had resulted in Jian Wushuang slaughtering more than half of them. Even Pang Tao from the Great Compassion Sect died in his hand. Is Jian Wushuang's ability really that terrifying? I heard that the reason those geniuses attacked Jian Wushuang was that he took a total of 3 position tokens in one go. My goodness, we've been waiting here for so long and didn't even see 1 position token. And Jian Wushuang got 3 of them. No wonder he was attacked. After hearing the news, genius disciples from different sects were stunned by Jian Wushuang's horrifying ability and coveted over those 3 position tokens that he possessed. However, An update soon arrived. 2 of the 3 position tokens that Jian Wushuang possessed had been respectively passed to Ancient Star Temple's Ice Queen and Narcissus Island's Zhongyi. Both of them went and hid in the outer area. This news was deliberately spread by Ancient Star Temple and Narcissus Island. Their goal was to lighten Jian Wushuang's burden. As expected, the genius disciples who were drooling over Jian Wushuang's position tokens had their greed decreased a great deal after receiving the news. Such was the norm, as it was a lot less tempting when there was only 1 position token. For instance, Long Zishan of the Great Compassion sect, who also had a position token, and many knew about it too, but no one really wanted to seek trouble with him. Those various sects' genius disciples would rather wait for the last 2 position tokens' appearance than confronting Jian Wushuang, since his abilities were much more horrifying than Long Zishan's. Therefore, quite a bit of pressure on Jian Wushuang had been lifted. However, none of those sects were willing to let him off easily, since he had offended them. After that news had gotten out, about 20 sects came together and posted a bounty. The subject was Jian Wushuang. Of course, the reward, 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power, 3 pinnacle ground treasures, and 1 divine demon nirvana elixir pill. That was only the reward for directly killing Jian Wushuang. Even if he could not be killed by cornering him into desperation and escaping with a safety token, one would also be rewarded with 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power and 3 pinnacle ground treasures. It caused a sensation in the entire saint's tomb as word went out. Nobody would have thought that those sects would come together and post the bounty. Moreover, it was such a highly priced bounty. The rewards were ancient god divine power, pinnacle ground treasures, divine demon nirvana elixir. Ancient god divine power was not as exclusive as it could restore or upgrade a cultivator's divine power. One of the opportunities in Saint's tomb, the divine power ocean, was solely built with ancient god divine power. Furthermore, divine power ocean was personally built by Crimson Stone Saint. It contained an infinite amount of ancient god divine power at the cosmic scale. In comparison to the entire divine power ocean, 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power were next to nothing. However, that only applied to super experts who were undying saints, such as Crimson Stone Saint. For regular cultivators, 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power was really not a small number. In the ancient god realm, cultivators most commonly bartered with each other using ancient god divine power. In normal circumstances, a rather wealthy first-class divine demon would own around 1,000 ancient god divine power, or even less. 10,000 ancient god divine power was a lot more compared to the possession of many peak divine demons. That was an enormous wealth to many genius disciples in Saint's tomb. Ground treasures were mystical weapons. Even the most regular ground treasures were enough to catch the eyes of third-class and second-class divine demons. Pinnacle ground treasure could even make first-class divine demons drool. However, the rewards that those sects offered were a total of 3 pinnacle ground treasures. The aforementioned was still a secondary matter, though the most precious and rare reward was the latter divine demon nirvana elixir. Divine demon nirvana elixir was a priceless treasure to any divine demon. During Jian Wushuang's past life, when the old dragon master's dragon mount was killed by Emperor Bai, he used a divine demon nirvana elixir pill as a reward to seek revenge, and had received the help of many divine demons. In order to obtain that pill, they agreed to his request without any hesitation. From that instance, one could see how important the divine demon nirvana elixir was. The elixir could help divine demons reach a breakthrough when they arrived at a certain juncture in their cultivation. For example, a second-class divine demon's breakthrough to first-class divine demon, or a first-class divine demon's breakthrough to peak divine demon. The elixir could play an important role even during a peak divine demon's breakthrough attempt to ultimate God. Therefore, many divine demons were naturally excited over it. The elixir was extremely rare and very difficult to produce. It was a strenuous affair for any wuxia wilderness sects to even produce one. Those sects actually took out one divine demon nirvana elixir as a reward to kill Jian Wushuang and avenge their disciples. That was enough to show that they were going all in to make sure Jian Wushuang had no survival chance. The results were obvious. The entire saint's tomb was in a stir as soon as the word had gotten out. Countless genius disciples from various sects went crazy over the high-priced bounty. Those who lost interest in Jian Wushuang and no longer had the intention of snatching from him his position changed their minds after catching the news. That was understandable, as the combined value of 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power, 3 pinnacle ground treasures, and a divine demon nirvana elixir pill was equivalent to a position token. Once again, Jian Wushuang became the target for all the geniuses. Chapter 2444. The Reign of Terror, 1. Outside the saint's tomb. How impudent! How could they put a price on my fellow Narcissus Island disciples' head? These people are from reputable sects, yet they had the audacity to act so brazenly. Elder Wujian cursed with his voice reverberated across the glade. Second elder, we from Narcissus Island have to do something about it, said Elder Wujian again. Elder Lingi said in a low voice, do something? What can we do? Should we just show up at their doors and question them? Even if we do that, what if they deny all responsibilities? Elder Wujian's expression turned grave. Deny? The news has traveled far and wide. How can they not admit to it? That's not necessarily true. Although news of the reward offer has been secretly circulated among the sects, none of those sects have publicly expressed their opinions. If they refuse to admit even when we question them, we will not be able to do anything to them either, said Elder Lingi. Bastards! Elder Wujian was furious, but he had to admit what Elder Lingi had said was reasonable. The current situation is beyond Narcissus Island's control. These sects have suffered such big losses in Jian Wushuang's hands. We can't do much if they placed a price on his head. Wujian, the only thing you can do right now is to inform Jian Wushuang about this, so that he can be prepared, said Elder Lingi. Elder Wujian's complexion flushed and helplessly nodded after pondering for a long time. Understood. Elder Wujian immediately acted and informed Jian Wushuang of the news. In a void inside the saint's tomb. Such a lucrative price on my head. 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power, 3 pinnacle ground treasure, and even a divine demon nirvana elixir. Ha! These sects really think highly of me. Jian Wushuang indifferently smiled. He was not worried at all. Big Sister and the rest deliberately spread the news that they have 2 position tokens in their hands in order to take away some pressure from me. But with this price on my head now, it has once again pushed me into the cusp of a storm. Well, now that I don't have any more scruples, I'll have some fun with these genius disciples. Jian Wushuang's mouth curled up slightly, and there was an astonishing cold glare in his deep-set eyes. The atmosphere in the tomb turned cold. The cold wind unbridled blew. In the inner area, Jian Wushuang carried his long sword and wandered alone in the void. Many genius disciples from the various sects gathered in the small inner area. Furthermore, Jian Wushuang's wanton act made him exceptionally noticeable. That is Jian Wushuang. Yes, it's him, and he's alone. They were the 8 genius disciples from the One Direction sect. Among them were 2 first-class divine demons and 6 second-class divine demons. Their eyes flashed with anger when they saw Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's head was worth 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power, 3 pinnacle ground treasure, and even a divine demon nirvana elixir. Senior brother, shall we do it? Asked a second-class divine demon. Nonsense. Of course we shall. If we could kill Jian Wushuang, it doesn't matter even if we don't get a seat to look at the Fengtian scroll. A first-class divine demon, leading the group, had a frenzied look on his face and could not hide his intent to kill Jian Wushuang. Remember, although Jian Wushuang is at peak chaotic realm, he's known to be extremely powerful. Even the great compassion sex Pang Tao died in his hands for some reason. We have to do it, but we must not take it lightly. We have to give our all when we strike, exhorted the first-class divine demon. Yes, those second-class divine demons' disciples nodded. Go! Under the command and guidance of the two first-class divine demons, those 8 One Direction sect disciples sprang out from the side and attacked Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang paused and gave the 8 disciples who went right at him a sideways glance. His blood mountain sword was unsheathed behind him. Swash! Jian Wushuang's figure disappeared out of thin air. He was in front of the 8 disciples when he appeared again, with 2 sword lights lit up. One of the sword lights was bright and dazzling, while the other had a mysterious charm. They were both incredibly fast. They were too fast for the first-class divine demons to react. Swish! 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 It was the sounds of a blade entering their bodies. Jian Wushuang was back to the original place where he was first spotted. His expression was cold and stern as he stared at the 8 corpses who were falling downwards in the void ahead. 2 ordinary first-class divine demons and 6 second-class divine demons. How stupid of them to dream of killing me. Jian Wushuang smiled contemptuously and did not bother to take a second look at the 8 corpses before continuing his advance forward. Outside the saint's tomb, the latest news was that 8 Clear Moon Valley disciples fought against Jian Wushuang head-on, and none were spared. The 2 first-class divine demons disciples who possessed safety tokens also had no time to crush their tokens and were all killed. The news spread and caused a lot of commotion in the glade. Oh no! My condolences to the Clear Moon Valley. Jian Wushuang is indeed very powerful. He is ruthless and has no mercy. Many powerful experts from various sects were admiring Jian Wushuang's power. But shortly after the news came about, 6 Refining Fire Palace disciples and 7 Water Moon Pavilion disciples joined forces to fight Jian Wushuang, but the entire lineup was killed in merely 2 breaths of time. 22 disciples from Crimson Hand Sect, Purple Robe Division, and Everlasting Heaven Temple joined forces to kill Jian Wushuang. 21 disciples were killed on the spot, and only 1 fortunate first-class divine demon escaped by crushing his safety token. The 4 major sects, Fire Thunder Mountain, Purple Heaven Sect, Void Temple, and Dark Feather Sect joined forces, but were defeated by Jian Wushuang, with most of their disciples killed. The bad news kept coming one after another. The inner area was not spacious, and Jian Wushuang was bound to run into those genius disciples from other sects as he roamed freely in the area. Most of those genius disciples would join forces and launch attacks at Jian Wushuang. However, the results were depressing. Those genius disciples were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered by Jian Wushuang, without mercy. 1 sect, 2 sects, 3 sects. After the news about the reward was announced, Jian Wushuang had encountered dozens of besieges and a series of onslaughts within half a day. As a result, among the dozens of sects who went into the tomb, 13 were knocked out. Most of those disciples from the remaining sects were also killed. In just less than half a day, more than 150 various sects' genius disciples died in Jian Wushuang's hands. Chapter 2445. The Reign of Terror 2. It was outrageous. Jian Wushuang's horrifying killing spree. In less than half a day, more than 150 disciples were killed. Among those disciples, the weakest were not ordinary second-class divine demons, but genius disciples from various sections. All of them were treated as treasures in their sections. Every single loss was painful for those sects, but Jian Wushuang killed them like lambs. He's crazy. Jian Wushuang is simply a killing machine. I heard he's only in his 20s this year and already has strong murderous intent at such a young age. What would he become if he's allowed to live? Kill him. He must be killed. I must kill this demon to avenge my disciples who died. Many sex experts were enraged. If Jian Wushuang had offended more than 10 or even 20 sects in merely one of his massacres, he had offended more than half of the sects in Wuxia Wilderness after his half-a-day killing spree. Those sects could not wait to kill Jian Wushuang. In a corner of the plains, the 3 elders of Narcissus Island were put under more pressure as Jian Wushuang killed even more. Matters are getting out of hand and completely beyond our control, said Elder Lingi coldly. I think Jian Wushuang did nothing wrong. Those people were after his head, so he didn't need to show them any mercy, commented Elder Wu Jian. That's true, but we have too many sects involved now. Jian Wushuang had offended most of the sects in Wuxia Wilderness. Even if Jian Wushuang could get out of the tomb in one piece, I'm afraid he will have to endure the assassination of various sections. I'm afraid that neither we nor Narcissus Island can protect him, said the 7th elder. The killings were so crazy, with many genius disciples killed. Such matters had not occurred for a long time in Wuxia Wilderness. There was without a doubt that Jian Wushuang's crazy massacre had aroused public outrage. Under all of the sects' extreme anger and pressure, Narcissus Island was unable to defend Jian Wushuang. Now, that young man can only look out for himself. Elder Wu Jian sighed. He had never expected such a situation. Initially, he thought as long as Jian Wushuang could make it out alive from the tomb, Narcissus Island would protect him under its wings. It did not seem to be the case anymore. Jian Wushuang was sauntering inside the saint's tomb. He had no idea where he was heading, so he just kept walking and killing wherever he went. His expression remained calm and unwavering. In his previous life, Jian Wushuang had seen scenes that were countless times crazier than this. He had killed innumerable people to the point he was numb. Killing merely more than 100 genius disciples did not affect him at all. The disciples are getting smarter now. Jian Wushuang scanned the area with his soul power. He could sense that many disciples gathered in the void near him, but no one acted rashly. They were just tailing him and making sure he did not disappear from their sights. Anyway, nothing could be done. Initially, those sex genius disciples wanted to rely on their own abilities to kill Jian Wushuang and monopolize the reward, but they had finally come to their senses after half a day. It was impossible to kill Jian Wushuang with merely 1 or 2 sects joined forces. They had to join forces with more powerful experts if they were going to take Jian Wushuang out. At least 10 sects had to join forces, and perhaps about 100 or even hundreds of disciples would have to besiege Jian Wushuang in an effort to kill him. Therefore, they could only wait to round up more people. Jian Wushuang was aware of their plans, but could not be bothered. As long as those disciples did not take the initiative to attack him, he would not want to start a fight. However, he would be merciless once his opponents struck the first attack. He would kill all of them if he could, regardless of which sect they belonged to or what kind of background they had. After all, he had already upset many sections. In his opinion, killing was still killing regardless of whether it was only one person or 10,000 people. Similarly, offending one sect or a few sects was anyhow still offending. If all the sects in Saint's tomb tried to kill him in exchange for the reward, he would not hesitate to wipe all of them out. As time went by, more and more genius disciples gathered around Jian Wushuang. I'm afraid it won't be long before people from the great compassionate sect arrive. Jian Wushuang muttered. during the half-day massacre. He killed too fast and had not come across people of the Great Compassion sect. However, as many sects had gathered around him, news about his location would have traveled fast. The Great Compassion sect would definitely be on their way as soon as possible. Jian Wushuang's expression changed as he lifted his head to look forward. There were 5 figures standing in his way in front of him. There was only one first-class divine demon, while the other 4 were only second-class divine demon. They were probably from an ordinary sect. What took Jian Wushuang by surprise was that they neither stepped aside nor attempted to kill him like the other ordinary sect disciples when they saw him. They merely stood in front of him and had no intention to move aside and give way to him. Jian Wushuang faintly smiled and moved forward to greet the group. "Senior brother, Jian Wushuang is here." A second-class divine demon among the 5 figures nervously quipped, "I know." The first-class divine demon among those 5 nodded heavily with a hint of terror in his eyes when he looked at Jian Wushuang. Who would dare to stand in Jian Wushuang's way? "Don't worry, we aren't his opponents." This first-class divine demon strived to maintain his composure. He immediately bowed and saluted when Jian Wushuang appeared before him. "Sunan from Ice Fire God Palace has met Senior Brother Wushuang." Ice Fire God Palace. Jian Wushuang's heart moved, and he finally understood why the 5 people in front did not avoid him. "So, you are from the Ice Fire God Palace? How's my second brother doing in your place?" Jian Wushuang smiled. The Ice Fire God Palace was a small sect in the Wuxia wilderness. Jian Wushuang knew them because his second brother, Zhuopeng, was a disciple of Ice Fire God Palace. Chapter 2446. Trapped Sunan's group breathed a sigh of relief when Jian Wushuang acknowledged their sect. Zhuopeng is now undergoing cultivation training in Ice Fire God Palace and making great progress. He has mentioned you many times. Unfortunately, he's not here in Saint's Tomb as his cultivation level is still rather low, explained Sunan. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly before waving his hand and taking out an interspatial ring. "There are many purple amulets in this interspatial ring, which I've collected in the past half-day. I will now give it to you. I hope you will take care of my second brother in the Ice Fire God Palace." Sunan took the interspatial ring. After glancing at it briefly, his face showed a pleasant surprise before he said, "Senior Brother Wushuang, don't worry. We as Zhuopeng's seniors will definitely assist in his growth." "I appreciate your efforts," said Jian Wushuang before he turned and left. Sunan and his team of 5 were stoked upon watching Jian Wushuang leave. "I know that we can get lots of benefits if we look for Senior Brother Wushuang now. Isn't that true?" Sunan said with a smile. Jian Wushuang must have accumulated many treasures after killing so many genius disciples in this short span of less than half a day. The number of purple amulets obtained was innumerable. Those rare treasures were useful, but there were just too many purple amulets. For the sake of his second brother Zhuopeng, he did not mind giving them some purple amulets. "Senior Brother Sunan, you are smart. Is it all right if we accept Jian Wushuang's gifts in front of so many disciples?" asked a disciple of the Ice and Fire God Palace nervously. "It's Jian Wushuang who killed their disciples, not us. Well, just ignore them if they find fault with us. Let's go." Sunan led those few Ice Fire God Palace disciples and quickly left. The other sect's genius disciples also ignored them. Jian Wushuang continued moving forward in the void, and he simply stopped when he passed a desolate hill. He sat cross-legged on the hill and closed his eyes. He stopped. The many genius disciples who followed Jian Wushuang around also stopped. "So, you aren't going to escape anymore?" Humph! How could he escape under so many pairs of eyes? It's better to find a place to sit down, regain his strength, and prepare for the last battle. Not necessarily. I feel that he never wanted to escape from the beginning. He's way too powerful, and we may not even be able to take him down on our own. Let's wait until the Great Compassionate Sect arrives. The Great Compassionate Sect is already on their way, and will be here soon. There were approximately dozens of sects which gathered around Jian Wushuang, and perhaps a total of more than 200 genius disciples. Even then, those genius disciples did not act rashly. They had no confidence to do it. All of them were scared witless by Jian Wushuang's crazy massacre. Many genius disciples who were first-class divine demons had been killed. None of them wanted to be sacrificed under Jian Wushuang's sword. Therefore, without absolute certainty, they dared not act on impulse. Wait. Although those genius disciples had an insatiable hunger for the position token on Jian Wushuang and his head, they could only remain patient and wait for the Great Compassion Sect disciples' arrival. Jian Wushuang was also patiently waiting. It did not take long. More than 20 figures appeared at an astonishing speed from a distance in the void. The Great Compassionate Sect is here. The eyes of those sect disciples who had been waiting for a long time instantly lit up. In just a brief moment, those 20 figures appeared in front of the hill where Jian Wushuang was. They were led by a young man wearing purple armor, Long Zishan. Next to Long Zishan was a beautiful woman in a white robe who had a cold demeanor. That gorgeous woman was Yu Aoqing, another 12 minor kings belonging to the Great Compassion Sect, and was ranked 8th. Yu Aoqing, one, as her name depicted, was an extremely cold and proud person. Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan immediately darted his razor-sharp gaze directly at Jian Wushuang, who was on the hill when he appeared. Is he Jian Wushuang? Yu Aoqing also looked at Jian Wushuang, but both her eyes and expressions were extremely cold. As for the other Great Compassion Sect disciples, they were gritting their teeth with anger. The Great Compassion Sect had always been arrogant, and many were accustomed to their behavior. As that was the case, their disciples were used to being aloof before disciples of other sections. The other sect's disciples were usually submissive towards the Great Compassion Sect disciples, but this time they suffered a big loss in Jian Wushuang's hands. Besides several core disciples who were beheaded by Jian Wushuang, even Pang Tao was killed. That did not only instigated provocation toward the Great Compassion Sect, but also shamed their disciples. The shame could only be thoroughly washed away if Jian Wushuang was cut 1,000 times. When many Great Compassion Sect disciples arrived, Jian Wushuang, who was sitting on the hill, slowly opened his eyes. Finally here, you guys are really slow. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently, but there was a trace of mockery in his voice. Jian Wushuang, I really admire you. You have offended all the sections. Each sect's genius disciples are chasing after you. You are just like a street rat being besieged, and you are still laughing? Long Zishan stared at Jian Wushuang. A street rat? This adjective is not appropriate. After all, have you ever seen a cat being wantonly slaughtered by a street rat? As for being trapped, that's not the case at all. At least, you people are not capable of doing that to me. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Long Zishan's gazes were extremely cold. Really? Jian Wushuang, I admit that I had underestimated you before. Even junior brother Pang Tao died in your hands, but do you think you will have another chance now? Junior sister Aoqing, you and I will strike together, whispered Long Zishan. Together? Yu Aoqing was surprised. Both of them were 12 minor kings with one ranked 3rd and the other 8th. They were both aloof and haughty at heart. Yu Aoqing was reluctant to join forces with Long Zishan, as their opponent was a chaotic realm younger generation disciple. 1. Yu Aoqing means arrogance or proud. Chapter 2447. War. Long Zishan explained, as if he could read Yu Aoqing's mind. Jian Wushuang could so unscrupulously kill junior brother Pang Tao and many various sects' genius disciples. I'm 80% certain that his power is above mine. Not only you and I are going to join forces, but they will also have to launch an attack together. Long Zishan's final sentence was directed to the few great compassion sects, first-class divine demons. There were a total of 4 great compassion sect, first-class divine demons, apart from Long Zishan, and Yu Aoqing, who had just arrived. The 4 first-class divine demons nodded in unison after hearing Long Zishan's words. Yu Aoqing's eyes were locked on her target and solemnly nodded. Let's go. Following Long Zishan's low command grunt, the 6 first-class divine demons concurrently aimed their attacks at Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan took the lead as the strongest among the 6. The purple armor on Long Zishan was glowing in a faint purple light, while a dark purple spear was in his hand. A cyclone from vague purple divine powers formed under his feet as he made his move, making it seem as though he was stepping on a purple dragon. He was moving extremely fast, appearing first in front of Jian Wushuang. Go to hell! Long Zishan's eyes shone like they were filled with electricity, and the dark purple spear in his hand instantly turned into a bolt of purple lightning and whizzed towards Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan is much more powerful than Pang Tao. Jian Wushuang murmured his admiration towards Long Zishan in his heart after judging Long Zishan's skill when he made that attack. Jian Wushuang also reacted immediately. A sword intent rose sharply. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered sharply as he drew his sword and swept it around. His actions were smooth and coherent. Swash! A poignant sword light emerged. A very gorgeous and extremely enchanting faint purplish sword light cut through the void, just like a purple phantom gliding past. Purple blood sword technique. Purple light phantom. They were both purple, but one resembled a flash of purple lightning, while the other was a poignant purple sword light. The two instantly collided. Snap! A crisp sound rang in the void, followed by before a purple arc and sword lights filled the space. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently as the two collided before casually swiping across his blood mountain sword and dividing its sword intent into 3 cold sword light streaks that were directed at Long Zishan. Long Zishan was neither afraid nor perturbed. The dark purple spear in his hand shot out and pierced one after another. Clang, clang, clang. All of Jian Wushuang's 3 sword lights were impeded. At that instant, Jian Wushuang lunged forward, and a surge of sword intent spread out like waves in a boundless ocean, instantly oppressing Long Zishan's body and the surrounding void. A series of invisible sword lights appeared out of thin air, and those sword lights engulfed Long Zishan from every direction. Such a weird sword technique. Long Zishan's expression changed. Under the coverage of those sword lights, Long Zishan had to defend himself with all his strength as he retreated. The two were exchanging moves, and it was obvious that Long Zishan was at a disadvantage. However, Long Zishan was no longer Jian Wushuang's opponent. At the same time, while Jian Wushuang was fighting Long Zishan, that cold woman, Yu Aoqing, had disappeared. The moment Jian Wushuang repelled Long Zishan, he felt chills crept up his back. Jian Wushuang was instantly alerted. Swash! A cyclone was formed out of thin air, and in the center of the cyclone, a jet-black dagger came straight out. The dagger exuded an astonishing gleam of phantom-like chilliness and went straight for Jian Wushuang's back. Yu Aoqing, the dagger's owner, had an extremely cold expression on her face. Swish! The dagger penetrated Jian Wushuang's body, but surprisingly, it did not hit any tangible matter. Instead, it made an air-cutting sound. The dagger stabbed nothing but air. Was that just a shadow? That's fast. Yu Aoqing squinted her eyes, slightly before instantly located Jian Wushuang's location and creeping up beside him. Jian Wushuang casually raised his hand and wielded his sword. It was an ordinary sword movement that seemed powerless, yet it had completely held Yu Aoqing captive. Yu Aoqing was unable to evade, forcing her to discharge her divine powers to parry off that attack. Clang! There was a low and muffled impact sound. Yu Aoqing's figure was slightly shaken. The dagger in her hand collided with the sword light, resulting in its directional change, but she still managed to resist the sword attack. Swoosh! Yu Aoqing's figure backed away and pulled some distance apart from Jian Wushuang. Be careful, he is very fast. His sword techniques are also very strange and terrifying, shouted Yu Aoqing in a low voice. Long Zishan, as well as the other 4 great Compassion Sect first-class divine demons, disciples, had also noticed the same issues. Don't fight against him one-on-one, use the 4-elephant formation, shouted Long Zishan. The 4 great Compassion Sect first-class divine demons, disciples, exchanged glances and nodded. The very next moment, the 4 emanated their auras, which merged into a powerful entity under their formation. Swoosh! Those 4 first-class divine demons simultaneously moved. All 4 of them attacked, but Jian Wushuang felt like it was coming from only one person. Is that a formation? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. He could not help but started to admire how incomparable the other sects in the Wuxia wilderness were to the Great Compassion Sect. He had killed so many other sects' genius disciples in the past half a day, yet he had never encountered such a formation that could fully integrate a team's combat power as one and unleashed its full potential, like how those 4 first-class divine demons had just done. The 4 had a tacit understanding of each other and worked well together, making the formation's power greater. The formation did not add up their combat power like 1 + 1, but multiplied it by multiple folds. It was obvious that when the 4 first-class divine demons teamed up, they gave Jian Wushuang a much more terrifying feeling than ordinary peak divine demons. Long Zishan's combat power was no less than a peak divine demon, but the threat and pressure Long Zishan brought to Jian Wushuang were no greater than the current 4 first-class divine demons altogether. The 4 joined forces and didn't give me a chance to break them apart. That's quite smart, murmured Jian Wushuang, while still being extremely relaxed. Kill him. One of the 4 murderous first-class divine demons waved a giant axe in his hand. Bang! A towering axe's shadow appeared out of thin air and went down full force on Jian Wushuang. This power has definitely reached the peak divine demon realm, exclaimed Jian Wushuang as his figure swayed and left a few space-time shadows behind. The axe cut through those shadows, but never managed to land a hit on Jian Wushuang's physical body. Chapter 2448. Subdued too fast. He was just too fast. We must impede his speed, otherwise our attacks will not reach him at all, said a first-class divine demon from the Great Compassion Sect. Long Zishan looked at Yu Aoqing. Junior sister, Aoqing, let me handle him. Yu Aoqing's face was cold. A gray gem that was exuding a strange aura miraculously appeared in her hand. The gray gem was filled with surging gray energies, and Yu Aoqing's divine power brought those gray mist out from the gray gem. The gray mist, in a speedy manner, covered the area far and wide. In just a blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang was instantly engulfed in the mist. He could feel a strong force oppressing his movements. Is this the power of a domain treasure? Jian Wushuang stole a look at the gray gem before shaking his head thereafter. It's indeed a domain treasure, but a very low-level one. It's probably just an ordinary domain treasure, murmured Jian Wushuang. Domain treasures were extremely rare, both in the eternal chaotic world of his previous life and the ancient god domain of his current life. Such treasures were scarce. Although Yu Aoqing was the top genius in the Wuxia wilderness, she was still only a divine demon. It was hard enough for her to come up with such a rare domain treasure, let alone bringing out some extremely precious domain treasures. I'm afraid you can't limit my speed with just a domain treasure, sneered Jian Wushuang. A single domain treasure is of course not enough, but how about adding this? Yu Aoqing grunted, and a stream of black current flowed from her. It soon filled the area and combined perfectly with the gray mist. The pressures on Jian Wushuang's body greatly increased the moment both of them coalesced. Oh, a domain's secret technique? Jian Wushuang's expression flickered. The gray mist was released from that gray gem treasure, whereas the black current erupting from Yu Aoqing's divine power was obviously a remarkable domain secret technique. The perfect combination of both had increased the domain's effect by multiple folds. Swoosh! Jian Wushuang tried moving around, but his expression turned grim after just 2 simple movements. My speed had been reduced by nearly 50%. Jian Wushuang was shocked. The reduction of his speed by half was equivalent to 1 fold. Humph! You can only blame yourself for being in a lowly realm and your insufficiently strong divine power. If you are as strong as a first-class divine demon, I might only be able to suppress 30% of your speed at most. Yu Aoqing stared at Jian Wushuang and scoffed. His speed has been limited, which is equivalent to breaking his wings. He'll die for sure. Attack! Long Zishan's expression turned ferocious as his killing intent intensified. Purple lights erupted from his body, while the purple cyclone got bigger under his feet. Boom! A fascinating bright purple light descended. Long Zishan appeared in front of Jian Wufang, like a formidable god, with his gleamingly dazzling purple light spear at hand. It's the purple thunder divine light spear. Long Zishan's spear pierced forward. Even the sky seemed to be perforated. Jian Wushuang frowned as his speed had been restricted, and he could not avoid the attack with only his current speed. He could only attempt to parry it with his sword. A head-on collision happened. Boom! Jian Wushuang fell backward. Haha, that's for sure. No matter how good you are, you're just a chaotic realm. Your divine power is, after all, far inferior to first-class divine demons. As long as your speed is restricted, you won't be able to display your sword techniques. In that case, you are not my match at all. Long Zishan let out a hearty laugh. An excited look appeared on the faces of Yu Aoqing and the 4 first-class divine demons, who formed the 4-elephant formation. They lunged forward to Jian Wushuang without wasting any time. Under the extreme speed limitations, Jian Wushuang was unable to perform his strange and terrifying sword techniques. He was completely subdued by those few people from the Great Compassion sect. Boom, boom, boom. The war began. A large number of various sects' genius disciples gathered somewhere near the battlefield as witnesses. Among the crowd was an extremely weak-looking girl in red who squatted there. Hong Luo. The girl heard a noise, turned towards the void's direction, and saw 2 figures rushing towards her. Oh, Huanshen and Huiyang. It's the 2 of you. What's the matter? The girl in red had a strange expression. Of course we have something to bring up. The young man in a white robe replied with a polite smile. That young man was called Huanshen. Just like Huiyang and Hong Luo, he was also one of the 12 minor kings. Huiyang was ranked 10th among them. Hong Luo was ranked 5th. Huanshen, who ranked even higher than Long Zishan, was ranked 2nd. He was the most powerful and terrifying among all of them. in Wuxia wilderness. Huan Chun had always been regarded as the ultimate expert who was second only to Tu Qianqing. Tu Qianqing had not entered the saint's tomb because he had broken through and reached the peak divine demon realm. Due to that, Huan Chun should be the strongest among the disciples in the tomb. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang had taken away his limelight. Hong Luo, don't tell me you're just going to stay here all this time and watch the great compassionate sect disciples behead Jian Wushuang. Bagging both his position token and the rewards on his head, said Huan Chun with a smile. Well, that's my plan. Can I do that? Hong Luo gave an insouciant reply. Well, you can. It's just a pity in this case, as Jian Wushuang has caused too much trouble in the tomb and offended countless sections. Those sects have put a bounty on his head, which has since increased. It seems that killing him will reap much greater benefits than getting a position token, commented Huan Chun. Huan Chun, just be frank and tell me what's on your mind. Don't go beating around the bush like this, said Hong Luo impatiently. Huan Chun was taken aback momentarily, and then smiled. Then it'll be straightforward. I've already discussed this with Hui Yang. Later, when those great compassion sects people push Jian Wushuang to dead ends, we'll immediately take action before them and finish him off so that the position token in his hand and the bounty on his head would be ours. However, this is a heist against the great compassion. After all, Hui Yang and I are outnumbered. That's why we're here for you. Chapter 2449. Hidden Cards. So, you want me to join forces with you? Hong Luo's attention was piqued. Yes, Long Zishan could only suffer in silence if both of us join forces, as there's nothing he can do to us, even if we snatch Jian Wushuang's head from the Great Compassion sect. What do you think, Hong Luo? Huan Chun smiled. I refuse. Hong Luo curtly shook her head. Huan Chen's and Hui Yang's complexion changed. Hong Luo, are you worried about the Great Compassion sect? Hui Yang asked quizzically. The Great Compassion sect is rich, so they don't care about the bounty. They just want to kill Jian Wushuang, avenge Pang Tao, and save their faces. As for whether Jian Wushuang died in their hands, it doesn't really matter. We may irritate Long Zishan if we do this, but we'll never rub the Great Compassion sect wrongly. You don't have to worry about it, said Huan Che. I refuse to join, not because I'm worried about offending the Great Compassionate sect, but I've never wanted to attack Jian Wushuang, said Hong Luo. What? Huan Chun and Hui Yang were startled. Well, Jian Wushuang did nothing to provoke me, and none of our sect's disciples was killed. Why should I kill him? Just for the bounty? Sorry, I'm not very interested in those rewards, said Hong Luo bluntly. If this is the case, so be it. Huan Chun and Hui Yang no longer lingered around and left. Hong Luo could not help but sneer in her heart as she glanced at Huan Chen's back. What a hypocrite! He's polite to everyone on the surface, but secretly is as cunning as a fox. Who knows what will happen if I were to join forces with him? Hong Luo could read Huan Chun like an open book. There were so many genius disciples in the saint's tomb that Hong Luo was spoiled with choices. Even if she was to join forces with someone, she would have never considered Huan Chun. Of course, Huan Chen's behavior was not the only reason Hong Luo refused, but the most important point was she never wanted to kill Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang is simply a super monster. I'm afraid that's unprecedented in the Wuxia wilderness. Although he has become a target for many and seems to be cornered, yet judging from his expressions and demeanors, he's not panicking or nervous in the slightest. Instead, he is still wearing a confident appearance. Hong Luo squinted slightly, not wanting to miss a single expression on Jian Wushuang's face. He could maintain such calmness and confidence even in such a crisis. He must be either an idiot who does not know the complexity of the world or still has a stronger trump card in his hand. It would be good if he died here. However, if he is to survive after this disaster, there will no longer be any sects in Wuxia wilderness that can threaten him. Instead, those sects will be shivering because they have got on his wrong side in Saint's tomb. I better stay away from such a monster. Hong Luo was extremely good at reading people, or rather very intuitive. Her instinct told her that she must not rub Jian Wushuang on the wrong side. The war continued on the battlefield. Those great compassion sect's 6 disciples. Long Zishan, who ranked third among the 12 minor kings, was considered one of the top peak divine demons. His divine powers were extremely pure, and his spear skills were remarkable. Jian Wushuang was completely not his match if they were to fight head-on. On the one hand, Yu Aoqing was controlling 2 domains to completely limit Jian Wushuang's speed, while at the same time, she was playing her skills and speed to their best. Her body was moving like a phantom, repeatedly appearing behind or beside Jian Wushuang when he was fighting against Long Zishan. Her dagger stabbed out over and over again. It could have easily caused Jian Wushuang a fatal injury if he was not careful. Lastly, there were the great compassion sect's other 4 first-class divine demons. Initially, those 4 first-class divine demons were Jian Wushuang's easiest opponents to deal with, as he could rely on his speed to break their attacks previously. However, as the 4 disciples formed the 4-elephant formation, which was capable of both attack and defense, they had become extremely powerful, putting a large amount of pressure on Jian Wushuang. Under the SIXS siege, Jian Wushuang gradually lost support, and his defeat seemed to be a foregone conclusion. Jian Wushuang, I thought your strength was amazing before, but it seems that it's nothing great now. As long as we restrict your speed, you'll not be able to fully display your strength and sword techniques. I see that you have a merely average peak divine demon realm combat strength. I'm afraid there was only an element of luck when you killed senior brother Pang Tao earlier. You will die today without a doubt. Long Zishan's sarcastic voice echoing within the space as his attacks towards Jian Wushuang with his spear was getting more swift and abhorrent. Jian Wushuang was wielding his sword with one hand and with his somewhat solemn complexion. Under the suppression of 2 domains, his speed was hampered such that even his strength was greatly reduced. It was tough for him to face 6 opponents at the same time. Young man, what are you going to do next? In that hidden independent space, the Crimson Stone Saint was observing his battle. He did not think that Jian Wushuang had been driven to a desperate situation. He could see that Jian Wushuang's composure remained calm since the beginning, without a trace of irritation. Now, show me what you've got. The Crimson Stone Saint was anticipating. Jian Wushuang sighed, helplessly on the battlefield. Old man, looks like you're getting what you want, murmured Jian Wushuang. Of course, he was addressing the Crimson Stone Saint. He knew all along what Crimson Stone Saint's objective was, and being placed in such a situation, he had no choice but to show his cards. Otherwise, not mentioning the many sect's disciples still hovering around and ready to take action against him at any time, even his fight against the great compassion sect's 6 disciples before him was proving to be difficult. Oh, well, look closely since you want to see my cards. I wonder if you have the vision of Mu Xiaoxiao, sneered Jian Wushuang. At that instant, boom, the stellar strength within Jian Wushuang's body exploded. The stellar secret technique was awakened. The stellar strength had long been integrated into his Bodhist divine powers and even his blood. Now that he had released its strength, his divine powers instantly began to change. Everyone was keeping an eye on Jian Wushuang in the middle of the battlefield. Huan Chun and Huiyang were ready to take action. Jian Wushuang's aura was getting thicker at an astonishing speed under everyone's gaze. Previously, he was only at the peak chaotic realm or perhaps half-step divine demon realm. However, his aura was getting more and more powerful with the rapid changes he was undergoing. He had soon broken through and achieved third-class divine demon realm. His strength and power soared instantly. Chapter 2450. Heaven and earth aligns. Did his divine power energy just become more powerful? Everyone around noticed the changes in Jian Wushuang's energy. His cultivation levels seemed to have increased. He probably performed a certain secret technique. Be extra careful. Long Zishan frowned before immediately looking towards those around him. Right at that moment, Jian Wushuang had already raised his head once again. A horrifying divine power had violently emerged with a rumble as he raised his head. The two layers of the domain that were pressing against him, the gray mist field and the black energy flow that covered the sky, were immediately affected by the divine power he was projecting, which greatly decreased its oppressive effects. No, Yu Aoqing was shocked. She had already sensed that the effects of her two domains on Jian Wushuang had been reduced quite a bit. Previously, she could at least suppress half of Jian Wushuang's speed, but at this moment she could not even suppress 20% of it. Jian Wushuang moved once again and exploded with much faster and more terrifying speeds than before. Careful, junior sister. Long Zicken warned quietly. Yu Aoqing immediately reacted and steadily gazed over. Jian Wushuang's figure had appeared before her, with his long sword already swung out. A blurry sword essence swept outwards. The time and space around were immediately frozen as ripples formed within the void. Space-time sword technique. First form, cutting snow. His sword technique changed. Yu Aoqing's pupils shrunk slightly. Jian Wushuang had been using purple blood sword technique, all the while when battling against them before. He pushed his speed to the limits with that absolutely strange technique. However, Jian Wushuang was using his own creation at this moment, the space-time sword technique. The sword technique he created was naturally his best and strongest sword skill. Ring. A sword shadow charged towards Yu Aoqing, and it was impossible for her to dodge it. However, in the end, she was still one of the 12 minor kings. Her black dagger had been pushed out in an instant such that even the void formed into a swirl as a result from that stab. Clang! The sound of metals clashing was heard as a trace of fear flashed across Yu Aoqing's face. The dagger she was holding flew out of her hand as her figure instantly propelled backward. Fortunately, it was not life-threatening. At the same time, Long Zishan had already appeared on Jian Wushuang's side. Eat this, kid. Long Zishan's entire body was glowing bright with purple lights with traces of purple-colored electric bolts sparking out of his eyes. The long purple spear in his hand had turned into a huge purple lightning beam as it swept up with crackles and infinite power. Sure as God-eliminating spear. Long Zishan shouted violently as the crackling lightning beam shot straight at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang steadied his eyes and sent Blood Mountain sword flatly outwards. His stab directly went to the middle of the purple lightning beam as a unique samsara strength swept outwards. Ring, ring. The crackling purple lightning in the lightning beam had turned into purple-colored divine powers and dispersed towards every direction. What? Long Zishan was absolutely shocked. He did not expect that his most powerful strike was so easily dissolved by Jian Wushuang. At that instant, Jian Wushuang attacked with his sword again. Ring. A blurry sword light lit up and directly slashing at Long Zishan. The sword light was so incredibly fast that it was almost impossible to react to it. However, Long Zishan reacted very quickly by retracting his spear to block the attack in front of his face. Just as the sword light most touched his long spear. Something's not right. Long Zishan's heart skipped a beat as the purple battle armor he was wearing immediately projected a blinding golden lightning bolt and once again formed a purple lightning armor on the surface of his purple battle armor. There was no feeling of two weapons clashing just as his spear made contact with the blurry sword shadow. Instead, a beam of mysterious sword light had slashed on the layer of purple lightning armor. Samsara sword technique, Samsara empty strike, empty yet solid, illusionary yet real. As he took a frontal hit from Jian Wushuang, the purple lightning armor on the surface of Long Zishan's body immediately dimmed. At the same time, a mouthful of blood shot out from Long Zishan's oral cavity as his body flew out like a broken kite. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had warded off two experts, Yu Aoqing and Long Zishan. The four-elephant formation formed by those four great compassion sects, first-class divine demon, were the only ones left standing around Jian Wushuang, like dumbfounded. Jian Wushuang's eyes seemed at a loss when he looked at those four. Although his eyes looked lost, the blood mountain sword in his hand was slowly raised. He swung his sword again. It was such a plain strike without sword lights or sword shadows bursting out of it, and also without any vibrations around. The world remained extremely calm and quiet. However, an extremely fast sword shadow suddenly slashed open the void under the silence. Ring, a blinding sword light, appeared out of nowhere. The sword light seemed to connect heaven and earth together. It was absolutely stunning and extremely bright. The moment when it appeared, it became the core and the focus of the world. It had even become eternal. There were many genius disciples from different sects around the battlefield, and all of them were mesmerized by the sword light. That strike was so beautiful. 9 seas and 8 wilderness, heaven and earth align. Jian Wushuang mumbled to himself. That stroke had connected time and space, yin and yang, life and death, all on a single point. Its name was Heaven and Earth Aligns. That stroke was something Jian Wushuang discovered when he was in the middle of his massacre at Saint's Tomb. That stroke had included Jian Wushuang's understanding of the space-time law, and was actually the second form of his space-time sword technique as well. Jian Wushuang had just created that form, and this was the very first time it had been displayed. Everyone around was immersed in the sword light's absolute beauty. However, the four great compassion sects, first-class divine demon, in the middle of that sword light, had their living souls frightened out of their bodies. The sword light slashed everything open from the moment it appeared, breaking the connections between four of them. Their four-elephant formation was completely shattered. However, the sword light's full potential was not fully unleashed. Quickly break the safety token. As one of the first-class divine demons spoke, the sword light had swept across their bodies before he could finish his sentence. Ring. The sword light had finally dissolved. Many disciples around the battlefield had finally snapped out of it. When they looked over again, they realized in the void where the sword light was at previously, those four great compassion sect first-class divine demon disciples had turned into badly decapitated corpses that were slowly falling downwards. The air had frozen at that moment. That Huan Chun and Hao Yang were standing side by side on the edge of the battlefield, feeling incredibly stunned. They were planning to go forward and kill Jian Wushuang. However, who knew Jian Wushuang suddenly burst into action? Merely in the blink of an eye, Yu Aoqing was flown off after taking a frontal hit. Long Zishan suffered severe injury. The four great compassion sects, first-class divine demon disciples were eliminated directly. The table was completely turned. Chapter 2451. The siege, the great compassion sects Long Zishan, Yu Aoqing, and four first-class divine demon disciples who formed the four-elephant formation were defeated while working together. Not only that, it was a devastating defeat. Long Zishan is badly injured. The four first-class divine demon disciples didn't even get the chance to break their safety tokens before they got cut down. The duration was too fast. Long Zishan and his group definitely had the upper hand a while ago. but the tables completely turned in only an instant. This Jian Wushuang is really scary. In the void surrounding the battlefield, there was already an emotional stir. The various sect's genius disciples were all stunned beyond words. Huiyang, let's do it. Huanchen gave a soft cry. Now. Huiyang frowned. Their initial plan was to let Long Zishan and his group push Jian Wushuang to a corner and take advantage of the situation after that. However, Jian Wushuang's ability is beyond our imagination. We can't only rely on the Great Compassion Sect disciples. We shouldn't wait anymore and must immediately take action. Only by working with Long Zishan and this lot could we have some hope to kill Jian Wushuang. Don't think too much. Let's do it. Huan Chen's voice was frosty. All right. Huiyang stopped hesitating. The two 12's Minor King experts immediately moved. Many genius disciples from different sects besides them had similar plans like Huanchen and Huiyang. However, the abilities Jian Wushuang unleashed were completely out of their expectations. They had no choice but to take action earlier than planned. Charge! Well, do it together. Only then can we possibly kill Jian Wushuang. Let's first kill Jian Wushuang. As for his head and the position token on him, that would depend on our individual skills. At that instant, dozens of individuals moved almost at the same time. All of those taking action were top geniuses from various sects, and every one of them was a first-class divine demon, without a doubt. That was to be expected, as ever since the intense battle started, all of them could see Jian Wushuang's abilities. Against such a terrifying opponent, it would mean instant death if those second-class divine demon participated. Only first-class divine demons were qualified to make a move on Jian Wushuang and posed some threats toward him. Therefore, those who took action at that moment were 50 first-class divine demons. It was safe to say that more than half of the first-class divine demons who entered Saint's tomb partake in the attack. Their target was Jian Wushuang. In addition, even though they came from different sects, they had a tacit understanding to first kill Jian Wushuang together before fighting for the position token in his possession as well as his head to be exchanged for those rewards. The tacit understanding came out of necessity since the abilities Jian Wushuang had shown were truly terrifying. Jian Wushuang continuously projected his soul power as he stood in the middle of the battlefield and immediately noticed when those 50 experts moved at the same time. Jian Wushuang raised his head, his eyes filled with a coldness like never before. Finally can't hold back. All of you want my head in exchange for the rewards? If that's the case, bring it on. I'll have a hearty fight with each of you today until the heavens change its color. His cold voice was like the deep growl of death, which lingered for a very long time as it resonated across the entire battlefield, Saint's tomb, and space between heaven and earth. Jian Wushuang's divine power surged like a great wave as his voice died down. The divine power swiftly concentrated and very soon formed a gigantic golden divine god hologram, one of the 5 most powerful secret techniques of the 7 Stars Black Sect, divine god of punishment. With Jian Wushuang's cultivation level upgrade and radically strengthened divine powers, the formed divine god hologram was no longer just 300 meters like before, but reached 1,600 meters. The 1,600 meters divine god hologram was definitely much stronger than the previous 300 meters, despite it still being within the divine god of punishment first stage. Jian Wushuang immediately gave out a furious growl as the 1,600-meter tall golden divine god hologram appeared. Sweeping out like rolling waves was a stern growl. In the void surrounding him, the gray mist and black energy flow domains were still suppressing Jian Wushuang. However, after that growl, the gray mist completely retreated while the dark energy flow utterly vanished. Both domain layers that previously were oppressing Jian Wushuang disappeared into nothingness. Jian Wushuang's abilities had already reached the highest peak possible at that time. There's still more to this guy. Yu Aoqing was utterly shocked and terrified upon seeing both her imposed domains had perished. As for those geniuses who were frenziedly charging towards Jian Wushuang, they could not care any less, despite seeing the golden divine god hologram and noticing the transformation of his abilities. At the end of the day, there were 50 first-class divine demons attacking at the same time. Each of them was geniuses with extremely solid battle strength. They even had a few 12 minor kings among them and many other individuals whose abilities were close to the 12 minor kings. Nobody could withstand the power of that many people who joined the siege unless a real god appeared. Hence, Jian Wushuang should not be able to do so either. Kill! Kill him! Cold voices shouted one by one as those geniuses' killing intent was surging like a tall wave. Kill! Jian Wushuang's eyes also had a trace of redness, with his killing intent also sweeping out of his body, like a Shura who emerged from hell. His figure was violently moving fast towards those geniuses around him. He wanted to accept their attacks head-on. Die! Huan Chun and Huoyang were charging on the forefront, becoming one of the earliest who crossed hands with Jian Wushuang. Huan Chun held a crimson-colored sickle in his hand as his bewitching eyes gazed at Jian Wushuang with a strange light. Ring! The formless soul attack had penetrated Jian Wushuang's mind. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang was a perfect chaotic creature and a reincarnated soul. Although his soul cultivation level was slightly lower, he was still an incredibly strong individual. In addition to his soul, was protected by the exquisite pagoda. Huan Chen's soul attack had no effect whatsoever on Jian Wushuang. Huan Chun was left with no choice but to lash out his crimson sickle. A red flash appeared and disappeared within a split second. As for Huoyang, he brought with him a wave of fire. His punch exploded outwards with powers similar to the sudden eruption of a volcano that has been dormant for hundreds of millions of years. The entire place was covered in a burning heat. Jian Wushuang's eyes were still frosty. The blood mountain sword in his grip was trembling violently at that moment, as if resonating with the surging, killing intent in his mind. With a swing, the blood mountain sword slashed without any flashy movement. That stroke was accompanied by an extremely horrifying power and surging sword essence. It was as if the world could be chopped into two halves with that stroke. The sword light swept sideways with an uprooting force along the way. The crimson-colored light, which was charging forward, immediately flew backward, with every trace of its volcanic energy was gone, as if being thrown into the ocean. The joint attack of Huan Chen and Huoyang had been reduced into a totally embarrassing state with only one slash from Jian Wushuang. Chapter 2452. Stamina. Jian Wushuang's abilities had another huge upgrade again. Huan Chen was shocked. So what? He still has to die. Huoyang's eyes were icy cold. The remaining first-class divine demons around them did not soften their killing intent at all. Suddenly, boom, 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 boom. A barrage of attacks was unleashed toward Jian Wushuang from every direction. Each of those extremely overpowering attacks was issued by first-class divine demons, and there were about 50 of them. Even though there was no formation involved, the energy of those attacks could still be described as horrifying despite not being completely focused. At least none of them was able to assert their survival after facing such a counterattack. The only thing they could do was taking out and breaking their safety token to escape. As for Jian Wushuang, he indeed had a safety token in his grasp. However, he would not break the safety token. As a matter of fact, not only would he not do so, but he also could not. He had bred enmity with too many sects during his trip into Saint's tomb and had caused an uproar. In such circumstances, the world outside may not be safer than the interiors of Saint's tomb itself. After all, Jian Wushuang had no idea if Narcissus Island could completely defend him. Even if they wanted to, could they do so? On the other hand, Jian Wushuang never liked to rely on others, hence he could only rely on himself. At this time, his only chance was to stay in Saint's tomb, obtain the opportunities he was supposed to get, and use it to upgrade his abilities. Only by doing so could he perhaps be qualified to face those various sections. Hence, he would absolutely never use the safety token. Piercing noises sliced through the air and swept towards him. Jian Wushuang could feel the terrifying energies that came from each attack around him. His eyes were filled with a sense of craze. That's right, bring it on. With a big shout, the divine hologram behind Jian Wushuang was also letting out an earth-shattering roar. Infinite sword essences shot upwards as Jian Wushuang's divine power ruthlessly swept outwards. In the center of the battlefield, Jian Wushuang had completely unleashed his powers. He issued continuous attacks with his sword, slicing, sweeping, or turning it into a wide-casting sword net, sweeping across the battlefield. With the help of space-time law, his figure burst into a terrifying speed, flashed nonstop, and left behind multiple space-time holograms at different parts of the void. Facing the attacks from multiple directions, Jian Wushuang would avoid it if he could, and block with his sword if he could not. Otherwise, he would resist it with his own body. Like a possessed person, he rushed towards any random direction at will in the center of the battlefield. After a wave of attacks, Jian Wushuang was still standing upright. Moreover, his figure had penetrated the crowd. Kill! Jian Wushuang raised his sword as he shouted with his cold voice. The heaven-shaking sword shadow swept out in a dreamlike manner. Let's resist together. There were a total of 10 first-class divine demons standing together before Jian Wushuang and resisting his attack. With a huge bang, each of those 10 divine demons flew backward at the same time under the impact of his sword light. A concentrated attack was launched once again behind Jian Wushuang, following a deep rumble. Scram! Jian Wushuang's growl was like rolling thunder as his sword swung out with momentum. A sword shadow infinitely expanded to the point of covering both sky and sun. The attacks launched by those 8 first-class divine demons behind Jian Wushuang was completely shattered with his single sword strike. Their facial expressions radically changed upon seeing the pseudo-divine demon Jian Wushuang charging at them. They could do nothing but unhesitatingly retreat. However, in the midst of retreating, ring! A powerful soul power penetrated Jian Wushuang's awareness, causing the exquisite pagoda in his awareness to violently shake before calming down after a short moment. Jian Wushuang's body paused slightly and looked over at the void next to him with a frown. It's blocked. Is this guy's soul defensive abilities that powerful as well? Huan Chen's face showed disbelief. Soul attacks were his forte, and the move he just unleashed was his most powerful one. Unfortunately, it still did close to nothing toward Jian Wushuang. Whoosh! Jian Wushuang's speed had reached the very limits as he recklessly charged toward different spots on the battlefield and crushed everyone present by relying on his sword techniques and his abilities. He unleashed his abilities to the max. Even though there were close to 50 very powerful first-class divine demon genius disciples who were besieging Jian Wushuang, they could not find a way to coordinate with each other since all of them came from different sections. What they had done was merely sieging and attacking. As soon as Jian Wushuang endured their first wave of attacks and infiltrated the crowd, it was very difficult for them to concurrently attack Jian Wushuang again. It was usually a group of around 10 to 20 or more first-class divine demons attacking Jian Wushuang, but he could directly withstand those frontal attacks. On the contrary, Jian Wushuang's sword attacks remained just as terrifying, and every stroke he released required at least 7 or 8 first-class divine demon disciples to resist against it. Individually, none of them would have the guts to fight against Jian Wushuang's sword. The battle heated up. The fight was absolutely insane. Terrifying rumbles filled the void. However, the obviously numerical, unbalanced, great battle actually went on for 7 minutes without a clear result. Jian Wushuang remained in his peak state as he rushed here and there on the battlefield, while those geniuses around were giving their all to attack. However, those attacks did not provide any substantial effects. This guy, Long Zishan, who was heavily injured by Jian Wushuang before, had swallowed an elixir pill and restored quite a bit of his battle strength. He also went back to the battlefield to join the siege. However, what he had not expected was that even with so many first-class divine demon disciples joining forces in the siege, they were unable to kill Jian Wushuang in a short time. The abilities that Jian Wushuang unleashed were unfathomably powerful. It was not only his abilities, but also his stamina. Yes, it was stamina. Such stamina reminded Long Zishan of someone. Senior brother Qianqing. When senior brother Qianqing was a first-class divine demon, he was exactly as courageous and fearless when facing a peak divine demon. He dared to accept a frontal attack, even resisting head-on. In the end, senior brother Qianqing cut down the peak divine demon. Long Zishan's body was trembling. To Qianqing, he was a legend among the young generation of Wuxia wilderness, as well as the idol of countless Great Compassion sect disciples and Long Zishan. Although Long Zishan was also a true genius and placed third in the 12 minor kings, he knew full well of the distance between him and Tu Qianqing. It was a type of distance that he could never catch up on. Long Zishan had absolutely no courage to compare himself to him when he stood before Tu Qianqing. However, he currently had the same feeling as facing Tu Qianqing when confronting Jian Wushuang. Chapter 2453, The Ultimate Strike of Death. No, he's actually scarier than senior brother Qianqing. Long Zishan stammered. Truthfully, Tu Qianqing was skillful, but however great he was, it was impossible for him to face close to 50 first-class divine demons in that manner when he was only in the chaotic realm. Forget about the chaotic realm. Even if Tu Qianqing was a first-class divine demon like the rest, he would have chosen to escape at the first given moment upon receiving attacks from so many genius disciples. He would never have the stamina to stay back and start a huge battle against them. However, Jian Wushuang dared to do it. Not only that, he actually succeeded. Almost 50 first-class divine demon genius disciples joined hands together, but could not kill Jian Wushuang in a short time. Not to mention that a lot of those first-class divine demons were already being overpowered by Jian Wushuang's abilities and stamina while fighting him. They also became fearful of him. At this rate, how could we even think of avenging junior brother Pang Tao? Long Zishan was very anxious. However, at that moment, a frostily beautiful woman was standing in a corner of the battlefield. She was Yao Qing. She did not join in the siege and attacked Jian Wushuang. She was only quietly standing there and staring deadly at Jian Wushuang. Everything in the surroundings, including those people, and the battle had vanished for her. Even her own presence was as good as vanished. There was one person left in her entire world, which was Jian Wushuang. In her mind, she was recalling her master's teachings. Her master was one of the highest-ranking elders in the Great Compassion sect who used to be a killer, an assassin. He was such a great killer that he would be called the Emperor in the Dark. As long as he made a move, he would ensure his opponent dies. That master of hers taught her how to become a truly qualified assassin, and also told her about the special state an assassin should achieve. That state was the state of self-oblivious. Forget about oneself. Forget about the world. Forget about everything. Remember only the target and the mission. Although her master had achieved that profound state and demonstrated it to her before, Yuaoqing never fully grasped it. However, at that very moment, she had her full attention staring at Jian Wushuang, who was on the battlefield, watching his every move and even facial expression. Finally, she understood something. Forget about myself. Forget about emotions. Yuaoqing murmured to herself, and her figure disappeared in a flash from the battlefield in the next moment. She had completely blended into the air, becoming part of the space, time, heavens, and earth. Nobody could realize her existence when she was in such a special state. She gradually moved closer to Jian Wushuang and very soon arrived somewhere near him. Jian Wushuang was still unleashing his sword techniques and fighting frenziedly with those first-class divine demons. Their battle intent was shaking the heavens. Buzz off! With a furious shout, Jian Wushuang lashed out his sword sideways and struck 4 first-class divine demons before him with the back of his blade. Although those 4 first-class divine demons tried blocking with their full might, the overpowering sword pressure still hit them hard as they fell towards the ground. Yuaoqing made her move at that moment. Nobody had realized that, including Jian Wushuang. Yuaoqing appeared behind Jian Wushuang and suddenly thrust her pitch-black dagger towards Jian Wushuang's heart. Self-oblivious state. Exterminate with one strike. Yuaoqing's eyes showed a terrifying glint of coldness. It was a crouching assassin who finally found the perfect time to strike and unleashed her ultimate strike of death. That one strike was enough to cause fear on any divine demon. It was too sudden. Yuaoqing's appearance was just too sudden. Nobody noticed she was there previously. Only when Yuaoqing appeared and thrust a dagger out that people were suddenly aware. It's Yuaoqing. When did she get there? That strike was perfect. What a perfect strike. Nobody would be able to block that strike. The first-class divine demons on the battlefield were all awestruck. Some even had fear written on their faces. All of them could recognize just how terrifying Yuaoqing's strike was. Her movement was so clean and perfect without any sense of redundancy when she attacked. That strike was sure to kill. Yuaoqing's attack at that time was really a pleasant surprise. It was just too perfect. Junior sister. Even Long Zishan was shocked by Yuaoqing's movement. He believes if that sudden strike was to be directed at him, he might not even have a survival chance. Following right after that shock was a feeling of ecstasy. He could tell that Jian Wushuang did not notice Yuaoqing's sudden appearance as well. It was impossible for him to dodge Yuaoqing's perfect strike. Jian Wushuang was indeed incredibly surprised. The perfect killing strike from Yuaoqing was also out of his expectations, and he did not have time to react to it. He could neither avoid the attack by relying on his movement speed, nor using his sword technique. He could only allow the dark dagger to stab his heart. However, he barely panicked. Ring, the extremely cold black dagger, which brought an infinite amount of killing intent, was closing in on Jian Wushuang's body. The dagger finally tore through Jian Wushuang's attire and penetrated his skin. Thud! When the soft sounds of the blade entering his body were heard, Yuaoqing felt somewhat excited. Master, I've finally done it. I've finally achieved what you described as the state of self-oblivious. Yuaoqing mumbled. The many first-class divine demons who were attacking Jian Wushuang were ecstatic when they saw that. However, suddenly, clang, a metal clashing noise was heard, and all those genius disciples' ecstatic smiles froze one by one. Yuaoqing surprisingly felt some resistance on the tip of her dagger, and was shocked the next moment. The tip of her dagger had indeed penetrated Jian Wushuang's skin. and went into his flesh. However, it only pushed slightly into it and did not reach Jian Wushuang's heart. It stopped at the rib bone in front of his heart. An explosive power had been projected when the dagger's tip touched his rib bone, but it did not shatter it. Instead, that bone had blocked the dagger. Bone. Yu Aoqing was completely shocked. My stroke couldn't shatter his rib bone. How is that possible? The genius disciples around were also dumbfounded. Long Zishan was also awestruck. They could not believe their eyes. One must understand that, although a cultivator could practice body-tempering methods and have a strong divine body, it was only an external feature and would not help with internal resistance. Chapter 2454. Huge freak Yu Aoqing's deadly perfect strike clearly penetrated Jian Wushuang's divine Buddhist surface defenses and went into his flesh. Normally, that should have guaranteed his death. However, the ultimate death strike was blocked flat out by Jian Wushuang's rib bone in the end. How hard was his bone? How's that even possible? Yu Aoqing's mind was filled with disbelief. What she did not know was that the world was filled with wonders. It may be unbelievable to some people, but for Jian Wushuang, the primordial void, celestial body that he practiced was a top-tier body cultivating secret technique in ancient god domain. The secret technique not only upgraded the surface area of his divine body, but also included the entire body structure, muscles, divine powers, down to every cell in his body. Each of them would have had a huge improvement. He had succeeded in learning the second volume of the primordial void, celestial body, adding to the fact that he was a perfect chaotic creature where every part of his body was perfect. Therefore, his bones were incomparable to a regular cultivator's. The bones in his body were definitely not weaker than those under a layer of strong body defense. As long as his bones were not shattered, it would not bring him any fatal harm. Yu Aoqing's perfect ultimate death stroke did indeed pose some threat towards Jian Wushuang, but she was still far from being able to kill him. I just don't believe it. Yu Aoqing gritted her teeth. Her arrogant self could not accept what just happened before her at all. With her divine powers gushing out of the black dagger and leading it, she immediately swept outwards. The other side of Jian Wushuang's chest had exploded into a bloody cave. It was only a bloody cave. Right at that moment, Jian Wushuang slightly turned his head around. Boom. Infinite killing intent swept upon Jian Wushuang like a collapsing mountain and tsunami. Yu Aoqing's figure was trembling for a while, and her mind had a bang. Junior sister, retreat now. Long Zishan shouted, explosively not far away. He saw that Jian Wushuang had already unsheathed his sword. Sword lights were swept by as a gigantic sword net completely covered Yu Aoqing. Yu Aoqing suddenly sensed a critical danger like never before filling her mind. She did not dare to hesitate, took out her safety token at the first possible moment, and pinched it into pieces. Ring. Some lights flashed, and Yu Aoqing's figure vanished right before Jian Wushuang's eyes. Jian Wushuang had formed the sword net in vain. She escaped pretty fast, spoke Jian Wushuang with his incredibly cold eyes. The bloody cave on the other side of his chest was rejuvenating at a speed noticeable by the bare eyes. Only within the blink of an eye, the blood cave had completely disappeared without leaving a mark. Jian Wushuang's aura had also not weakened at all. Many first-class divine demon disciples besieging him were almost completely dumbfounded. Such a perfect, powerful, and terrifying strike had already gone into his body, and yet it did not kill him. His Buddhist defensive capabilities are so strong. Let's not even talk about killing him. His aura did not even weaken a bit. It obviously didn't affect him in any way. That rejuvenating capability, was that a joke? Huge freak. He is a huge freak. One could not blame how stunned they were. When a normal cultivator, even a peak divine demon, was faced with the perfect ultimate death stroke, such as that, he would probably die. Even if he did not die, he would at least be severely injured, and his abilities would have drastically decreased. However, even though Yu Aoqing had injured Jian Wushuang, he was immediately rejuvenated completely. He cured his wound in a short moment without the assistance of elixirs, but only relying on his own recuperative abilities. The terrifying body defensive abilities and rejuvenating abilities made the geniuses on the scene feel like they were living in a dream. All their hearts were shaken after that occurrence, and they even began to wonder if they could ever kill Jian Wushuang. Their doubts grew bigger by the minute as the intense battles continued. Especially after another round of continuous fighting, they sensed that Jian Wushuang still remained in his top form. This caused those geniuses to completely lose their confidence. Huan Chun, did you notice? Up till now, Jian Wushuang's divine powers are still at the same level. Huiyang came next to Huan Chun. Huan Chun nodded solemnly. I saw it. After fighting for such a long period of time, we who attacked him had used up quite a bit of our divine powers, but his divine powers felt infinite, while his battle strength did not decrease at all. How can a mere chaotic realm cultivator have such limitless divine powers? His speed is amazingly fast. His understanding of space-time law is incredibly high. He can form up to 6 different space-time shadows at once, and the powers of his sword techniques are frighteningly strong. One stroke from him takes at least 7 or 8 first-class divine demon to collectively resist. Otherwise, it's impossible to do so. His Bodis defensive abilities are even scarier. A perfect strike like that from Yu Aoqing could not kill him. Moreover, his injuries were cured in the blink of an eye with his incomparable rejuvenating abilities. His soul defensive abilities are also pretty strong, such that my soul attack couldn't pose any threat to him. And now, his divine powers also seem infinite. Huan Chun and Huiyang both looked at each other and were unable to hide the shock in their hearts. They were exclaiming in their minds. What kind of monster exactly were they fighting against? That monster was grotesquely strong in every aspect that one could not find a weak point at all. For them, he was impeccable. If he were to be described in a single word, perfect would be it. Yes, it was perfect. A monster. A huge freak who was perfect and flawless in every way. How did such a freak come about? Huan Chun mumbled. They did not know that Jian Wushuang was the second perfect chaotic creature within the mortal world. A perfect chaotic creature was in existence with no weakness to begin with, and was extremely perfect in every aspect. Due to the fact that Jian Wushuang was only in the chaotic realm, he still could not reach true perfection. However, as long as he broke through to divine demon realm in the future, he would be truly perfect by definition, the only one within heaven and earth. What they had just seen was actually nothing in comparison. We had exhausted every existing method. We had used whatever could be used, but we still couldn't kill him. There's just no way, said Huan Chun hopelessly. Huiyang, who was next to him, also nodded. Those first-class divine demons that were attacking Jian Wushuang also looked over. Whether or not they wanted to admit, the truth was that a total of 50 first-class divine demon who joined hands still could not kill him. Setting aside killing him with a real strike, they could not even exhaust Jian Wushuang to his death with either their combined divine power or time. There's nothing else to do but to stop. There's no other way. This Jian Wushuang is really too much of a freak. Let's forget it. It's only a waste of time to continue fighting. The first-class divine demons exclaimed lightly, and one by one stopped their movements, obviously ready to give up. Chapter 24:55. Golden Prison. Those first-class divine demon disciples stopped their attacks. Although they wanted to stop, Jian Wushuang did not. Boom. Jian Wushuang's energy surged into the sky as he charged directly toward a few first-class divine demons and swung his blood mountain sword. They were startled and resisted with all their might, but were immediately blasted backward. Jian Wushuang, we have stopped. What more do you want? Yelled one of the first-class divine demons. Jian Wushuang chuckled. What more do I want? You fight whenever you want and stop as you wish. There is no such thing. Don't all of you want to kill me? If so, let me have an old hearty fight. You either kill me or die under my sword one by one. Jian Wushuang stuck out his tongue and licked his lips while wearing a crazed expression on his face. Madman! The first-class divine demons could not help but curse at him in their minds with their rage-filled hearts. Jian Wushuang, do you really want to fight until both of us suffer great losses? Huanchen shouted. Jian Wushuang sarcastically said, both suffer great losses? I want die, but none of you should expect to live. All those first-class divine demons were shocked with their rage burning even brighter. It was true that they could not kill Jian Wushuang, but he could not do much to them either. However, Jian Wushuang said they should not expect to live. Where did he get the confidence to say that? However, right at that moment, a surging wave of divine powers was unleashed from Jian Wushuang's body. The giant golden divine god hologram behind him was glowing with an even brighter golden light as well. As Jian Wushuang waved his hand, a few palm silhouettes clapped at the void. Prison of punishment. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed, and as soon as his voice died out, a huge amount of gold-colored divine powers extended out of the divine god hologram. The golden divine powers expanded far and wide, forming a large ocean of golden divine powers. It soon filled the entire place and covered the whole battlefield in it. The golden divine power ocean very quickly concentrated and solidified, turning in a gigantic golden prison. The first-class divine demons' faces changed when they saw that gigantic golden prison, which surrounded them. Domain tactic? It's not merely a domain, but a complete prison. It has completely imprisoned us. Blasted open. Some first-class divine demons immediately started taking action, hoping to break open the golden prison. However, after a few rounds of attacks, nobody could shake the golden prison a bit, even when the attackers included Huanchen, Long Zishan, Huiyang, and more. Jian Wushuang stood at the center of the golden prison, looking at those first-class divine demons trying to break out of it without any intention of stopping them. Prison of punishment. This is a complete and true-to-the-definition prison of punishment, murmured Jian Wushuang. Prison of punishment was a tactic within the divine god of punishment secret technique. In his eternal chaotic world's past life, he had seen Emperor Bai using it. However, the divine god of punishment that he learned was incomplete, and so was the prison of punishment that he used. When Emperor Bai used it, it only formed the golden divine power ocean which acted as a domain and tied an opponent's hand. The prison of punishment's true function was to imprison the opponent. Golden prison was the complete stage of prison of punishment. Following Jian Wushuang's upgraded cultivation level, in addition to increasing another half a stage with the help of 7 Star's secret skills, he could finally perform prison of punishment. Once he did it, the humongous golden prison locked every first-class divine demon inside. As for Jian Wushuang, who unleashed the prison of punishment, he had become the golden prison's master. Rumble. With a tiny tweak of his mind, the overpowering golden divine power ocean unfolded and affected every first-class divine demon in the prison. Those first-class divine demons felt a titanic mountain pressing on them. Damn, it really is a domain. A very strong domain. Under this domain, my abilities are suppressed by at least 30%. This Jian Wushuang could actually think of such a tactic. the many divine demons who were imprisoned in the golden prison were feeling uneasy. However, they only knew that their own abilities were suppressed under the effect of the golden divine power. What they did not know was the prison of punishment's domain causes one's suppression to become the other's gain. As the prison of punishment's master, Jian Wushuang's abilities were enhanced quite a bit as their abilities were being suppressed. The slaughter begins. Jian Wushuang smiled cruelly as his figure, whoosh, in a flash, with the golden divine power filling the space. The many first-class divine demons around could not clearly see Jian Wushuang's figure. All they saw was the sudden flash of a sword light. Careful! Screams of horror filled the air, but the warning clearly came too late. As the sword light dimmed, a total of 4 first-class divine demons could not even react before being instantly killed. Whoosh! Another beam of sword light appeared in another corner. There were 7 first-class divine demons at that corner who immediately reacted when they saw the sword light. They acted right away, wanting to block the beam of sword light. Ring, a gigantic sword light, appeared out of nowhere. The sword light was incredibly attractive and bright as though it could connect the sky and earth together. The moment it appeared, it became the focal center of heaven and earth. It even became an eternity. Throughout 9 oceans and 8 wilderness, heaven and earth aligned. The 7 first-class divine demons' faces still had the shocked look, although their divine bodies had already been penetrated by the sword light, forever losing signs of life. Prior to unleashing prison of punishment, even if Jian Wushuang used heaven and earth aligned with all his power, as long as 7 or 8 first-class divine demons joined forces, the attack could be resisted. However, within the prison of punishment, where one suppression became the other's gain, a huge gap appeared between Jian Wushuang's abilities and theirs. Now, when Jian Wushuang utilized that move, even 7 first-class divine demon joined hands could not resist it. With just one stroke, another 7 first-class divine demon perished. This scenario shocked all the surrounding first-class divine demons. Quick, think of something to break down this golden prison. If we stay here, we would only be chased and slaughtered by Jian Wushuang. Quick, blast the prison. The first-class divine demons attacked with everything they had. However, they underestimated the golden prison's sturdiness. Precisely speaking, they had underestimated one of 7 Stars Black Sect's strongest secret techniques. 7 Stars Black Sect was the ancient god realm number 1 sect. For the divine god of punishment to be acknowledged as one of the strongest secret techniques of such a sect, it enjoyed great fame in the ancient god realm. The prison of punishment move within it was also especially famous.